Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Logical, Plausible, Probable. I'm your host, John Maddox, and tonight we're having another stream you just won't want to miss. If you got what it takes, click that link, or prepare yourself, for this arena is not for the weak. Now, let the mental combat begin, but always make sure your arguments are LPP. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to a very late night for getting started here on Logical, Plausible, Probable. Excuse me, I've been thinking about what I wanted to talk about today, and then out of nowhere, I remembered this very interesting discussion that happened last year, right at the beginning of this year. Anyway, not too long ago, between Joshua Swamidass and Michael Behe. And I remember being struck by a couple of the points that Behe made in the conversation. That were, obviously I'm not bashing Swamidass as an atheist or anything, but he oftentimes uses some of the same talking points that we hear from the atheists. And I remember when Behe kind of issued his response to it, I was kind of struck by it. So I thought, hey, why not review this very interesting combo these two guys had and see what comes of it. Now, if people want to join the stream and kind of engage in the conversation, you're welcome to do so. Link is in the side chat. We can get involved in that. And before we do get into the review, I want to say what's up to Doki Doki and Jamie. We've got some great members and some awesome super sticker slingers. Appreciate you guys very much for supporting the channel. Looks like the one and only Matt Powell is in the house. What's up, Matt Powell? How are you doing, man? I know you got some good stuff going on down there in good old Alabama temporarily. Hope you're doing well. Looks like Raw Matt, also known as Young Earth Creation, is also in the house. Man, Matt's been doing some crazy stuff. I got two Matts. I got Matt P and Raw Matt, but Young Earth Creation Matt has been doing some crazy stuff on his channel as well. And I think you just cracked like 13,000 subs. So many congratulations on that one, Raw Matt. And yes, anybody else wants to come on in, feel free to do so. But without further ado, I am going to get into reviewing this very interesting conversation with these two well-credentialed scientists and see what people think about what you're going to hear.
Anymore. I'm also a Christian, and I follow Jesus, and I find myself as a scientist in the church and a Christian in science. I have written a book that you just pointed to called The Genealogical Adam and Eve, and also founded Peaceful Science, which you can find online. And that's kind of something I do on the side. Really been trying to figure out how to think about theology and faith and science and all of that together in a way that makes sense, that can kind of bring us to a way to make sense of all these things together. I'm also known a bit as a critic of intelligent design. I'd like to see myself as a friendly critic. I have a lot of friends in that movement, but when it comes to some of their scientific points, I've just disagreed with them. And so that's what I hope will make the conversation interesting today.
Right. Yeah. And that's precisely why I wanted to have you on. You're relevant experts. You are a Christian, and you are a friendly critic. And I have obviously I've engaged and read your work, and I think you are the perfect interlocutor for this conversation. So thank you for being here. So Dr. Behe, if you wouldn't mind a brief reintroduction on your end.
Yeah, sure. My name is Mike Behe. I'm a professor of biochemistry at Lehigh University, and I too am a Christian. I'm a Roman Catholic, was born into a Catholic family, and I never concerned myself with evolution or Darwin's theory because Catholics really didn't care about that. People said that Thomas Aquinas had it all figured out a while back. So, what did I care? I got interested in evolution though in the mid '80s when I read a skeptical book called Evolution: A Theory in Crisis by a biochemist, geneticist named Michael Denton, who was also a medical doctor too. And he raised a lot of things that I had never heard about in my scientific training, and that startled me. And so I began looking into, I started to look into the question of who had explained all of these complex systems that you routinely come across in biochemistry, and was chagrined to find that nobody had, that essentially everybody was just nodding at each other saying, yes, we understand how this came about. But if you looked in the scientific literature, you would not find that. So at that point, I became interested in evolution, especially in biochemistry, since that's my discipline. And I've written 3 books now over the decades expressing my doubts about the.
So, real quick interjection. So, for those of you who have not read of any of Behe's books, one of the things that he is kind of referring to in relation to reading Denton's book was that he had not actually gone to analyze if some of the fundamental assumptions that the evolutionary biologist operates from had actually been proven in relation to, especially in relation to the biochemistry. So he actually went and started to do a little bit of introspection on one side in terms of his assumptions, as well as some investigation on the other into the papers, and started looking at some of the quotes and the references and such, and went down the rabbit hole and found out that some of the foundational concepts, when you actually read the papers that were being quoted, in no way, shape, form, or fashion substantiated the said assumptions, especially in regards to the chemistry. And that really, catalyzed his interest in this whole thing. And then obviously, fast forward, 30 years later, is now a very staunch advocate for intelligent design and kind of the initiator of the specified complexity, irreducible complexity concept that is very interesting in the whole world of ID and evolution, undirected evolution arguments. Let's continue.
Darwinian theory and my contention that intelligent design is a better explanation for the foundation of life.
Right. Very cool. Okay. So I know we didn't want to make this the focal point of the conversation. I really do want to drill down into the specific empirical disagreements that you two have. But we are coming up on an anniversary of, I guess, something of a
We are an anniversary of it.
We are. Okay. Would you mind actually giving the brief explanation of that then? Because you're probably more familiar with it than I am.
Yeah, so if we were to go back exactly 15 years from now, there would still be, we'd be in the middle of arguments for the Dover trial. But Mike actually probably has a better handle on precisely where we would be in the proceedings. And they would have ended, I think, November 4th, so sometime next week. Or was it December 4th? About November 4th. And then the judge would have been going into thinking through what his opinion would be, and it would be the end of December that he would deliver the verdict on the Dover trial. This is the Kilmitzer, if I pronounce that right, versus Kitzmiller versus the Dover Education Board. And we just interviewed Eugenie Scott at Peaceful Science about that. Pretty soon we're going to be interviewing Ken Miller. I asked Mike if he would let me interview him, and he said no, which is a real bummer because we were really wanting to kind of get some views from different sides. Both Ken Miller, who's the author of Miller and Levine biology textbook, and Mike Behe were both star witnesses actually in this trial. And they were really asking, without getting into too many of the messy details, what is going to be the place of ID within high school education? And they decided, in a way that very understandingly, a lot of people in the ID movement are going to contest. I'm just trying to explain what happened, right? That wasn't going to work what they wanted to do right then. And so that's kind of the history. That was 15 years ago. I think it was widely appreciated, I think, to be even in the ID movement, to be really not a good thing for ID, and it's not what they wanted to happen. And it's interesting to look at what's happened to the ID movement since then, and maybe even Mike can give us some clues about that as well.
Quick interjection. I find it very fascinating that 15 years, whatever it was, after the Dover trial, we have people scientists still claiming that the ruling of a non-scientist judge somehow proves their position beyond all doubt. So the non-expert that you guys are always dismissing anybody who disagrees with you as is the one who issued a ruling, much of which was directly quoted from the arguments from the plaintiffs, the experts that were against it. Sorry, and on behalf of the opposition. And all in all, we have just a ridiculously overused talking point. Do you remember the Dover trial? Yeah, dude. We've heard it being regurgitated over and over and over again as somehow the be-all, end-all dismissal of a question in relation to science. And yeah, so I'm pretty sure way back in the day, there were priests and archbishops and such and cardinals that said that the, Earth did not revolve around the sun. So are you saying because a preacher said? Because I'm pretty sure you use that talking point all the time about religion and faith and such. So it seems to me that you're placing a lot of faith in your in a judge, while simultaneously dismissing any kind of faith in a higher power. So what's good for the goose is good for the gander, and that's why I always wonder why Swamidass uses these kind of talking points, since he, I don't necessarily question his salvation, but I think it's just something that needs to be kind of put aside if we're actually going to address things from a scientific perspective.
How would you add to that story? I tried to be as helpful for people who are new to it as possible without hitting on any of the landmines.
Well, let's see. I would start out by recommending that everybody read a particular book called The Trial, which was written by a man named Franz Kafka. And if
but that's Kafka. That's not the actual trial. If
you've heard the word Kafkaesque, it's not the Dover trial, but it sure sums up my view of it. Kafka was famous for thinking up these surreal situations where the things appear for no reason, and you don't know what's going on, and that's what I thought of the
I see.
trial.
That was your experience with it.
You have to realize that courts are not good places to discuss ideas. They are places where lawyers try to win and lose, and lawyers want to paint the other side's witnesses as either fools or knaves or both. I've written a summary of my experience in it, which I sent to Josh in lieu of my appearing on his podcast. And the main point that I make is that there is no evidence that the judge understood any of the academic testimony that was presented at the trial. You have to remember, this opinion was written by an English major from Dickinson University, and who was a lawyer and a failed politician and the appointed head of the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board. And whenever he wrote about the academic side of the trial, that is about the biochemistry, me and Ken Miller, theology, paleontology, and so on, he copied the text that was handed to him from the lawyers for the plaintiffs, which I don't know for sure, but looking at the phrases, almost certainly was not written by the lawyers, but by Eugenie Scott and her folks.
Right, can I respond to that?
Not yet, please.
Okay, sure.
National Center for Science Education. And there's no, so essentially he just signed off what on already was their argument. And there's no evidence to show that he understood any of these concepts. So yeah, it's a legal win, it has force, and so on. You know, it's defensible as whether or not a particular idea or a particular school board erred in trying to get something put into the school curriculum. But as an intellectual matter, as some sort of judgment on either Darwinism or design or anything in biology, it has, it has no value.
Yeah, so I know, again, I want to make sure that we don't spend too much time on this because our time is limited, but Josh, definitely want to hear your response to that. And then,
well, first of all, I think it was interesting because I just talked to Eugenie Scott on Saturday, and that's online right now. First of all, I think actually we'd all agree that a legal trial is not the right place to adjudicate scientific issues. I think we'd all agree. It was
Okay, so Swamidass agrees that a court is not the place to adjudicate scientific issues, but then he and a plethora of people in his camp, both Christian and otherwise, constantly refer to the Dover trial. But he just stated it's not the place to be adjudicating scientific issues. That seems interesting.
Interesting. I asked them at the end, Nathan Lentz and Eugenie Scott, if you imagine a world maybe like 10 or 15 years from now, where ID's gotten rid of all its bad arguments and it's actually made a strong case that's solid, that's convinced a large number of scientists, would that prevent it from being taught in high schools? I mean, would that, I mean, like that actual finding? And they actually said, well, I mean, this is kind of like a fantasy world, but if that actually happened, then actually, yeah, that wouldn't stop it. That would actually really help. So I think what they're saying, which I think you're agreeing with, is that actually how scientists see this in the end is going to be far more important than how lawyers see it. That's the first thing. Second thing is, I mean, I've talked to lawyers about this, and it turns out, now this is something that's outside my expertise because I'm not a lawyer. It's outside your expertise too because you're not a lawyer, but it turns out that it's actually very common for judges to just copy from one of the sides that they're agreeing with. So what they're trying to do is just judge which of the sides they're doing, and a really good written case will have a really good brief given by one side will actually have a lot of quotes. So that's not actually an indication of anything. I wouldn't have known that, honestly, unless I actually talked to some lawyers, and we were discussing other cases as well. But you're right though, because he's not an expert to adjudicate this. But I do think that there's a couple facts that I think you would agree with, Mike. I think you would agree, tell me if I'm right, I think you would agree that the majority of biologists are not on the same page with you on your arguments. They disagree with the argument you made. Do you agree with that?
Yes, of course I do. And I've said so in all of my books.
Yeah.
I pointed out that this is a new idea, and I laid out my argument. So whether they agree with me or not is not the question in my mind.
Yes, I agree.
It's whether they have a response to my arguments or not.
Well,
I
that's why I'm
haven't seen
saying
anything.
that. I'm just trying to focus on the common ground. I think we agree that, and then that fact doesn't mean you're wrong. Because maybe
It's so interesting how Swamidass is obviously making a slightly veiled appeal to consensus to somehow be, like negating any future positions that Behe's going to take in this little back and forth they're having. It's like, oh, well, majority of people don't believe you or don't agree with you. Therefore, what you are saying doesn't have substance. Now, he's not saying that directly, but it's a very, very common tactic that's used by folks who want to, circumvent any actual substance in overcoming the ID arguments that dramatically negate, the conventional paradigm and all their standard talking points. So, Dr. Kenny, this is too good. He says, I finally got through to Smokey, cleaned up his act, joined the convent, and now he goes by the name Sister Smokey. Oh man, that's a good one. That is a good one. All right, let's continue.
Everyone else is wrong and you're right. So I'm not making an appeal to authority. I'm just saying as a fact, the majority of biologists disagree with you.
I'm not making an appeal to authority, but most people that are considered an authority don't agree with you. So this isn't an appeal to authority, but I'm kind of appealing to authority, even though I'm not appealing to authority. Good one, Swamidass.
And we can assess that differently, right? And it does seem to me that if you're going to take, kind of a policy point of view, what should be taught to high school students is what the majority of biologists think. And the best way to change how it's taught is change what the majority of biologists think. And I think actually if maybe in the next 10 or 20 years, if your arguments are as strong as you think about it, Mike, maybe you would convince all of them and that would change everything. So I do think that he was probably qualified and correctly assessed that the majority of biologists disagreed, and that's the case, right?
I think that's a kind of naive, simplistic view. I don't mean any disrespect by that. Scientists not only assess evidence, they have a worldview. They like to look at things in a particular way. And at the trial, although I don't want to talk about this trial, and I don't want to talk about what gets in schools or not, I don't care.
Jamie, sorry I missed your super chat earlier. Jamie says Swamidass has loosened his salvo. Well, I think he's opening, first round here. And he's getting well deflected by Behe, and then we'll see what comes up here. They get later on, if I remember correctly, in this they get a little more heated as things get going. But right now we're still in the opening game portion of the debate.
I homeschool my kids. So what do I care? What
yeah. So do I. Yeah. And I definitely want to get to the arguments too. So let's just have one final
talk about whether it's true or not.
Yeah. So let's have one final word on it, and then we'll move on. Mm-hmm.
Okay. The point I want to make is that if you look through the history of science, it's real easy to find a number of places where the entire scientific community thought something was correct and it turned out to be wrong. There's also not too hard to find ideas, new theories that seem to have religious implications, and scientists didn't like them simply because of that. And I talk about the Big Bang theory extensively in the Dover trial to illustrate that point. And because it was not written into the opposing lawyer's document, the judge did not copy that into his opinion. Nonetheless, when the Big Bang theory was first proposed, it seemed to many scientists to smack of creation and so on. And a number of them explicitly said that science needs an eternal universe, and the claim that the universe had a beginning is not scientific. So scientists are not Mr. Spock. They're not just logic machines. And even social aggregations of scientists, scientific organizations, are not just logic machines either. They have their own way that they want the world to be, and they can resist ideas quite strenuously if it goes against what they expect.
Okay, so we are in a relevant anniversary, and that's good that we acknowledge that to begin with. But let's turn to the thing that I think most people are interested in.
And I think the point that Behe just made has been epitomized by Swamidass actually writing an article in a prominent, published in a prominent source that specifically states he wants to basically blackball anybody who advocates for intelligent design in traditional education. So it's like, if you're going to take that position and then argue you're not part of the establishment who wants to be resistant to any kind of modification or threats to the conventional paradigm, yeah, I'd say the evidence is already been put forth by your own actions, as well as the plethora of debates and other things that you have conducted over the years. And not really sure why you're so adamant about this, but I don't know.
Is it true, right? Are the critiques, and I understand that intelligent design is sort of an umbrella term, and there's different people hold different criticisms, I suppose. So I want to focus on your work specifically, Dr. Behe, because you're on the podcast. So would you give us just a brief sketch? I know that Dr. Swamidass is familiar with your work, but just for the audience, what is the criticism in a nutshell? And then let's just drill down and dive in from there. Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me just quickly say why we conclude intelligent design. Intelligent design, or something resembling it, was pretty much universally thought to be true before Charles Darwin, and it wasn't a religious conclusion. Rather, people, philosophers, natural philosophers looked at the world and they saw regularity, and they saw really impressive structures, and they looked at the heavens and the stars and so on, and they thought these things are arranged for life on Earth. And it turns out that when we see things that seem to be arranged, that seem to have a purpose, that's when we conclude that, hey, maybe these were purposely done. Maybe these are the result of intelligent design. In 1859, of course, Darwin published his book, Origin of Species, where he said, yeah, no, yeah, that those look designed, but I have a different explanation. I think there's an overlooked natural process that can explain that. And that's random mutation or random variation in natural selection. And that won over people over the years. But in Darwin's time, they didn't know about molecules. They thought the cell was a fairly simple little thing. And since then, science has discovered that the foundation of life, the cell, is enormously complex. It contains very sophisticated machinery and much else that I've written about in a couple of my books. And in the meantime, that means that the problem for Darwinism, random mutation and natural selection, has grown larger and larger, because now not only does it have to explain eyeballs and wings and so on, it has to explain this molecular structure of life. And I have written in my books why I think it cannot, and I have used that old argument, the same old argument of the purposeful arrangement of parts, to say, hey, at the foundation of life, there's an incredibly strong purposeful arrangement. So that's the gist of it. As far as I can see, the critique, and of course Josh will correct me here, but the critique is a couple of things. Number one, you're not allowed to invoke design because we say that's not scientific. Number two, in the future, Darwinism will be shown to be able to explain those things, even if it can't now. Or number three, in the future, some other idea will be shown to explain it. Those are the chief ones in my experience.
So, Josh, why don't you come back now? And are there?
So I think Dr. Behe is making some very good points there. And for any of you who have listened to any debate that I've ever had or on the subject, and the hundreds of other debates that are had on a regular basis on these topics, those are slight spins, sometimes not as eloquently articulated, but usually those are some kind of variation are the spins that are utilized when the incredible complexity, specification, arbitrary value assignments necessary, all these different things that in any other context we recognize necessitate a intelligent agent in order to be plausible and just to exist, period. One of those talking points that Dr. Behe just referenced are usually what is thrown out as a hand wave, oh no, just dismiss whatever the point's being made without actually addressing it. And I find it so ironic when we hear this ad nauseum, given the fact that we are a theist or somebody, just anybody who is against intelligent agency is accused of God of the gaps, God done it, we don't know, therefore God, without actually even comprehending the underlying components that would be required for these things to actually occur. And I really don't understand, other than being desperate to avoid the obvious conclusion. I really don't understand why so many Evo atheists, especially on YouTube, that are forever instantiating their positions into the ether of the internet archives would not actually take the time to go and see if their positions are actually substantiated or are the result of massive amounts of previous assumption and, desperate need to prove a point in order to continue somebody's funding, their establishment credibility, and just, professional credentials at large. That's before even accounting for the brainwashing that is been put forth for such an extended period of time.
Because just to give people a little bit of background, you co-authored one of the initial published responses, critical responses to Dr. Behe's latest book. So you say that you disagree with his scientific evaluation on certain points. So yeah, why don't you come back now and
yeah, and to be clear, he's written 3 books. I've read both. All 3 of them very closely. So that response was to Darwin Duvall's, but what Mike just discussed right now was maybe more closely related to his first book, which I can talk about as well. But let me just start by saying that he talked about the conclusion that he has, that everything's intelligently designed. And I just want to say, in that large conclusion, I actually agree. I share that worldview. I think that, and I would even go farther to say it was divinely designed. I would say that God designed it all. I think that God created us, everything. He did it intentionally, and in that sense, he designed everything. So any of the disagreements we have here are not actually about that conclusion. Mm-hmm. I actually agree with that conclusion. And it's not about worldview, because I'm in that same worldview. The difference really has to do about whether or not the argument being made is sound. And that's the nature of the agreement. A disagreement here, because I do actually agree on that ultimate conclusion, and I even publicly articulate that I did that even as a non-tenured scientist, that I think God designed us all. I think he created everything. And so I've been willing to take risks in my career to say that publicly. So that's not what the debate is about. It's not about whether or not God actually designed things. It's rather whether or not the specific argument being made against it makes any sense. Does that clarify a little bit? And
it does for me, and maybe we could even use me as something of a case study. So Josh, I know this is the first time that we spoke, so I don't assume you know anything about me, nor is it all that interesting. But I was an atheist for a while, and I became a theist predominantly, if not exclusively, because of the philosophical arguments for God and the soul and stuff like that. Evolution was something that I just sort of assumed as part of my educational upbringing. My background is philosophy; it's not science. So I just had no reason to ever really question it, right? When I became a theist, same thing. I saw it as sort of, I had to, clear up a few things here. Okay, is this compatible? Especially as I became a Christian with Adam and Eve and stuff like that. And I wish your work was around a little bit sooner. Might have helped me sooner on that question. But yeah, once the worldview switched for me, evolution still wasn't like it wasn't like a big hang up for me, right? Like it just wasn't. And I will say it still isn't, in a sense, right? So, and the reason I bring me up is because I just never really took much of a look at the intelligent design movement, even as I was kind of moving from atheism to theism, because it just didn't seem of pressing concern to me. However, curiosity gets the better of me, and especially I start to see we can all be honest, there's been a very vitriolic reaction to a lot of this work. Not all of it, but some of it has been.
To be clear, it's been mutually vitriolic, right? So
yeah,
not every individual person, but there's a lot of animosity from mainstream scientists towards ID.
Right.
There's also a lot of animosity from a lot of ID people towards mainstream science. It's kind of like it's kind of a mutually messy thing. I mean,
I wonder why there would be any pushback from ID scientists to get ousted from their positions, don't get funding, and even if they are heavily credentialed, are publicly castigated and labeled as nut jobs for denying things in the conventional paradigm that they spent 30-40 years studying and are professionally credentialed to analyze things and probabilities and plausibilities, and based on their own particular expertise in the different fields. And you have mathematicians, biologists, chemists of variety of persuasions, computer sciences, all these different folks who are all doing analysis of these things and saying, I don't recognize the plausibility of this. And then being, just completely and utterly eviscerated by their quote unquote peers. And then they're in the minority of modern academia. And then Swamidass can be like, well, there's some pushback from the ID people. Like, yeah, I think people like Douglas Axe are pretty nice about it. I mean, he was a well-respected scientist working at Cambridge and ends up getting kicked out for putting forth an argument after like 7 years of research on whether or not, what was the implausibility and the functional non-functional protein ratio of possibilities. And they basically kicked him out of Cambridge for daring to publish such a concept. And it's like, so you question something, you kicked out, but you're the one who's being vitriolic. I don't know about that.
Mike is largely kind of stayed above the fray, and I also have too.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I want to have you two discuss, because it's.
So you have to keep in mind that there are organizations that work to stop intelligent design being discussed, to stop intelligent design books from being published or papers being published, and so there, while some people in each side might be.
And I wonder who might be part of the group who's trying to keep those papers from being published and the concept from being discussed in mainstream academia. Oh, wait, that would be Swamidass is part of that group, because he's literally written articles on this exact topic with a call to action to blacklist said people. So I don't really know how you can make the claim that's not what's happening, Swamidass.
Chill and mellow, and others might be vitriolic. It's an uneven, asymmetric battle here, because the organized power, the organized centers are all on the Darwinian side.
So we can circle back to that, because I think that is an important maybe social factor it's worth considering. But the point I'm driving is that as I actually read Dr. Behe's work, and then I read the critiques by Ken Miller or something like that, as a non-specialist, which I admit in that field, I at least came away with the impression of, okay, there's at least something more here than my initial impression was. That there is a case, right? Whether it's an ultimately successful case, I'm not sure, but it definitely wasn't deserving of the hand-waving dismissals that I just assumed by relevant experts was the case before. So I become, I call myself something of a friendly advocate for at least discussion around this. So I guess that kind of situates me in an interesting, maybe makes me somebody who hopefully can moderate discussions like this fairly, just given where I was and how I kind of entered into this. So with that being said, as somebody, for me, Josh, who's read his arguments, who's read the criticisms, where do you think his argument fails? It's like on the empirical level, right? Because I get all the philosophical considerations of the boundaries in science and this and that, and those are important questions. They are. That is good.
I mean, we have to be very clear here. Mike has made several arguments, and I can't really talk about them broadly very well. So we can talk about individual ones. So I'll talk about the one that he's just mentioned here. So first of all, there's actually a large part of what he said that I agree with. So he stated that that he's with his conclusion that everything's designed, and I even went a step further and said I think it's actually designed by God. He doesn't do that in his argument, but I think that is exactly what we should say. Okay, I think he says correctly that.
If I could just say, I don't say that everything is designed. As a matter of fact, I don't think that everything was designed in the fact of being explicitly intended by God. Even though I am a theist, I think there's stuff, there are non-intended side effects of many things. So no, I have run across a number of folks like yourself, Josh, who do think that everything was intended by God. But
no, I didn't say it was everything is intended. So this is getting to theology and like systematic theology. I think we're just struggling with language because we're biologists and not theologians. I'd rather not go down that rabbit trail. I mean, except for to say that I'm just articulating the doctrine of creation, that God created all things. I think that you agree to. And if that's what we mean by God designed all things, which I think you agree to, so maybe you mean something different and God intended this particular thing. Now let's be clear, I agree with that part. I think it's just a language issue between theology and science we're dealing with. Maybe not, we can work that out later. The other part that I really agreed with, he says that in general, that when we see the purposeful arrangement of parts, that it seems to indicate design to us. And the way how Doug Axe would put it, which I would agree with, is that it's a design intuition. He's not an ID supporter, but Alan Planigo would call it a design discourse. And I think that there's something that's actually what's so strong about his argument and correct, because it kind of brings you into direct, visual appreciation of the beauty of God's creation, and it's kind of written on our hearts. And Doug Axe would kind of goes much deeper into this, and I think correctly that we just naturally respond to think, oh, this is beautiful, and we worship God with it, right? I think that's completely correct. When we were
but that's not at all what I care about.
I know, but I'm telling you the part I agree with.
Okay, well, you can't agree with me on that, because I have some significant disagreements with it. You're attributing to me some things I don't actually believe. As I said,
Okay.
I was taught evolution in parochial schools and so on, and I thought, that's fine. I did not have any objection to evolution on religious or theological grounds.
Okay.
It was strictly on scientific.
I believe you. I believe you. I'm just using Christian language and explaining why I agree with the things that you said. You said that we recognize design by purposeful arrangement of parts, and I'm agreeing with you on that. And I'm explaining why I agree with you on that. And the reasons might be different than yours. Is that okay for me to agree with you for different reasons?
Okay, I guess so.
All right. Wow, it's so hard to agree with you, Mike.
Yeah.
All right. So now where does the problem come? So the problem is now, how do you break that down into a scientific argument that actually works by the rules of science? And I'm not talking about methodological naturalism. And I'm not even going to bring into the issue about design versus that, divine design versus that. I mean, I think there's some theological critiques that we made, but we can just leave it all aside. When you get into the details of these arguments, the definitions that are often used are not applied consistently with enough rigor for it to work. Even if you take it out of design, like if I made a similar argument having nothing to do with design and used and did those moves in the argument, I'd have a lot of problems. I wouldn't be able to get my paper published. And I know that because I've been struggling to get a lot of papers published over the last 10 years. And so when I look at that, it's before this call, I was on a phone call for an hour actually talking with one of my collaborators, and we were debating what we actually meant by a specific word because it was creating a great deal of confusion across disciplines. And we needed to make sure that in our argument we were actually applying it in a very consistent way that made sense, and we weren't, and it was creating a lot of confusion, and we were really concerned about this.
Okay, could you give a specific example?
And what has happened, I think this has been happening a lot, especially in the irreducible complexity argument. And there certainly came up in Darwin Devolves as well too, is that there tends to be critical concepts that are defined in ways that are not consistently applied,
such as
in ways that really undermine the argument from an evidential point of view. And as scientists, we're really trained to kind of hone in and understand those.
Can you give an example?
And so that's let me just finish talking, Mike. I'll let you talk. And so that's kind of where my
You can tell that Swamidass, what he's talking about right now is like his foundational dismissal of everything. Like, oh, if we haven't established everything semantically, therefore, if there's any confusion, whatever the argument is must be false. Which is ironic given the fact that there is massive difference of opinion and definitions that are going on between philosophers of biology and biochemists and biologists and information theorists and such in relation to things like metaphor. What's a metaphor? And is XYZ metaphor or literal? Like, is there mechanical function in proteins? No, that's just a bunch of metaphor. And then you've got people whose literal title is mechanobiologist, like who are actually studying the mechanical function of proteins. I just interviewed one, Dr. Ben Galt, a week and a half ago. I mean, it's like, so don't sit here and try and use definition as a way to dismiss the submission of arguments. Okay, fine. You want to have greater clarity, so be it. But if you're going to say that the justifiable reason to block an entire approach to the research because you disagree or may or may not agree completely 100% with the definitions being used, that to me is not really a justified reason to argue about this stuff. Let's continue. And you can tell that Behe is kind of like, okay, buddy, let's get to the real substance and to the meat. Let's actually argue that something real, not your little talking points here.
Just my professional mindset kicks in. I want to know, what is that? And when I've looked over the history of it in several key terms, for example, irreducible complexity, I can show actually how, I saw is a better way to put it, how Mike, very well-meaning, I'm sure, actually shifted definitions over time in a way that, as a scientist trained in academic argumentation like this, it just raised red flags. When I looked into it closer and I tried to make the argument work, I just couldn't, because those shifts end up being really important to making it seem on the surface like a strong argument, but at the lower level, it just isn't. So go ahead. Sorry, Mike. That was just my assessment, and maybe I'm wrong. You can convince me different.
Well, I note in your talk that you didn't refer to any example that I talked about in Darwin's Black Box. You didn't refer to any example I talked about in other books. You just said kind of vaguely that, definitions shifted, and you didn't even give the definition. So you haven't actually said anything substantial in the in the example in Darwin's black box to get across the idea of irreducible complexity. And like Josh, maybe unlike Pat, I'm not a philosopher. So I write, as precisely as I can. But the definition or the example of irreducible complexity I gave for a broad audience was a mousetrap, a mechanical mousetrap, where you have a wooden base and a spring and a hammer and all these things. And I said, if you take one of the parts away, it doesn't work anymore. And I said that that's a problem for an evolutionary pathway such as Darwin would propose, because because random mutation and selection depends on improving things stepwise in tiny steps. And it's real hard to see how you can make even a simple mousetrap by numerous successive slight modifications, as Darwin in his book, The Origin of Species, demanded. And as a matter of fact, to my satisfaction, nobody has been able to explain even that in the 25 years.
Hey, let's talk about mousetraps. I'd like to talk about
Okay, in just a second. I'd be happy.
So I'm guessing that Swamidass is about to spew the supposed counter that, oh, well, you could use the spring for something else, and then the hook for something else, and the base for something else, and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, well, theoretically, yeah, but that doesn't actually explain how they organize themselves into the specific locations that would be necessary, nor how those specific part components were formed, again, without the intelligent agent. Like, if you have the intelligent agent, yeah, it's no problem. And yes, I could potentially create own mousetrap, because at some point a human did create the first mousetrap out of different parts. Now, whether or not the first inventor of it utilized different scraps of different things, different, mechanical pieces that they had available to them in order to create the first mousetrap, that's neither here nor there. Because in that context, even if that was so, then it was an intelligent agent that was necessary in order for that to be executed. Therefore, the concept of evolution and undirected process, being able to utilize these separate parts in order to form the more advanced compilation, or the end output of the compilation, it doesn't support your position. I don't understand why atheists use this one ad nauseum. And I know it, well, I know the reason they do. Many of them because they don't think about the bigger picture, and because they've heard a few guys with PhDs spew the argument and then not actually address the underlying concept of how do you remove the intelligent agent from the equation in order to pull this off. Like, I don't understand why people let them get away with this. It drives me up the wall.
In 25 years, nobody has been able to explain that, let alone the scientific examples I gave. Perhaps the best known of those is, say, the bacterial flagellum, which everyone here knows, but perhaps some of the listeners won't know that it's an outboard motor that bacteria use to swim. And it's phenomenally complex. It's clearly a machine, and it's also irreducibly complex. If you don't have the tail, the propeller, if you don't have the motor, if you don't have a number of different parts, it doesn't work. And it's real hard to see how that could be put together step by gradual step. And what's more, as I reiterate in my newest book, Darwin Devolves, ever since the first book came out, people railed against it, but there has been no progress. There have been no scientific papers published which demonstrate or even come close to demonstrating that random mutation and natural selection could build such an intricate machine. So that's the problem that I want to hear about. That's the critical claim. Darwin's theory, a lot of Darwinists say that the important thing about Darwin's theory is that it showed that design in biology is an illusion.
So I want to respond, but if you put too many things on the table, it just gets confusing. I mean,
yeah, well, okay, please do then.
Put some good ideas out there I'd like to respond to, but keep on going. I can't actually.
So I didn't really find what Behe was just saying there to be all that difficult to follow. And we've got MD plus PhD computational biology expert Swamidass over here, who knows exactly what Behe's referring to, and then is acting like he's somehow just putting forth all this stuff and getting, I mean, you can hear the defensiveness in Behe's voice, or sorry, in Swamidass's voice right there in his actions. Like, oh no, I might actually have to back up some of these claims. Oh my goodness. Let's get ready to spew some talking points before it gets any further and, explains to people why my position is bovine scatology.
Engage, unless you don't want to, if you want to just kind of, I mean, I'm happy actually if you want to keep on going. There's just 2 points I want to make, and then I want to go back. I mean, there's one point I want to make about that last point you made, and then go back to the very first point about the mousetrap. So first off, I'd actually say that most informed biologists would agree with you that Darwin's theory does not explain what we see. That's actually kind of irrelevant because modern evolutionary science cares about a lot more than just random mutation and natural selection. There's quite a large number of things that are more important. And when we start to think about molecular evolution, there's a lot of non-Darwinian processes that become important. So that type of language, I think, ends up being perhaps well-intentioned, but ultimately misleading because, yeah, we already agree with that point. If that's your point, that's actually been really well established since I think when you were in high school, Mike. So I think that,
so for folks who aren't paying attention or not paying attention, they not realizing what Swamidass is trying to talk about here. It's one of the things that I joked about in one of my videos of, basically how to trigger an atheist. But something that always gets people all worked up is if you use the word Darwinism and you don't be like modern synthesis or neo-Darwinism or extended modern synthesis. I mean, all these different rewrites of what evolution supposedly is. They're like, well, I don't agree with the original version of Darwinian evolution. So unless you insert all of the necessary caveats, then I'm just going to assume that the arguments you're putting forth are only in relation to, the original version put forth in Origin of Species, and not any things that have been developed since. And in this context with Swamidass and Behe, for Swamidass to make that position is just a straight up insult, or Swamidass is an idiot. Like there's no in between, because if he claims to have read Behe's books, then he knows full well that the arguments that he puts forth are not directly in relation to the original 1800s version of evolutionary theory, like in any way, shape, form, or fashion. And they actually address as many of the standard talking points and then the supposed ways that they're explained in the new iterations of what evolution is or supposedly is. So it's like, Swamidass, are you being untoward and being purposely, misdirecting to the audience? Or did you not actually claimed you read the books and actually didn't? I mean, I'm just saying, like, dude, this is not very for those of us who has read the books, for you to be making this position, I know you, like I said, I know either you're full of crap or you didn't actually read them and you don't actually know what the positions are and you're just spewing your standard talking points. Like most academics that I've interacted with and observed that haven't actually gone and researched whether or not the standard, consensus talking points that they're spewing are as valid as they
I mean, I think you were in high school in the 60s, right?
Yes.
So since the 60s, that's actually been very well appreciated by anyone informed about this. So yeah, we agree with that, but that kind of leaves the entire point beside the point, because we don't care about Darwin's theory. We care about how evolutionary science is understood.
So Josh, just for the audience who aren't familiar, what would be an example of something that is a non-Darwinian process?
So there's a large number of things that are non-Darwinian. One example that I've given is neutral processes. So for example, one of the things found out in the 60s, so I'm pointing to Kimura's work. So Haldane, actually I learned about Haldane and Haldane's dilemma from reading creationist literature, and how he said there's not enough time to fix all the changes that we've seen, and to do that, and that was a point he made, and he was correct mathematically. I heard about the dilemma from creationists, but I didn't hear about the solution until I actually looked at what the literature actually said. Is a few years later, Kimura showed that actually the majority of fixation events or how the changes are not caused by selection; they're totally independent of selection, or largely independent.
And what do they build?
What?
Do they build a flagellum?
That's a different question. I can make a different point. I want to change the topic.
That's the question I'm interested in.
So does that single thing explain it? No, it's an interaction of a very large number of mechanisms. But if you are reductive to say, does that one thing explain it? Of course not. There's no one thing that explains it. It's going to be a complex interaction of many things. And if you leave out any one important mechanism, no one would expect to explain it. So to say that I don't think that X plus Y can explain that, when we know that A, B, C, D, E, F, and Z are important too, is kind of like a strange argument to make. It's a very, very strange argument to make.
Okay.
That's the first thing, but I want to go back to the mousetrap. You put too many things on the table before, okay? So then I think it gives a really good illustration of the point I made about shifting definitions and why this ends up being really critical. So for selection to be an important process, there's got to be some sort of function that's being improved upon. And he's right about that. I already told you that selection isn't the only way things can be made. But if you look at what he said, he says if you take any one part away, he means the spring, if you take that away, if you take the base away, if you take the trap part of it away, and if you maybe take the trigger part of it away, I don't know, I mean, depending how you make these, maybe it could be like 3 to 5 different parts, right? Then the overall function of the mousetrap stops working. And he's right. But here's where the wiggle word comes in. And I'm not the first person to point this out. Draper is a philosopher who wrote out a very long explanation of this. And when Alvin Plantinga, a Christian, read this is actually what really changed his view of intelligent design. The point is that each of those individual parts could have had other functions. And actually, biologists have been saying and I'm not an expert historian, but I know at least since I was in college. And
so a couple things. Number one, I find it interesting, like, oh, well, Draper, a philosopher, was able to convince Plantinga, another philosopher, that the different parts could have been used somewhere else. But I really wonder if they've analyzed what would be necessary for the parts to exist in the first place, let alone at the same time. And like, oh, we have all these hypotheticals for something else that it could theoretically do. We see little parts over here, little secretion mechanism over here, and that kind of stuff. Okay, fine. We see that sort of thing happening in all sorts of mechanical components. Like, are you going to tell me that because I can use a hose to connect from the radiator to pass through and cool the engine, are you suggesting that somehow because there's a hose there and there's also a hose that goes from your let's see, or small lines that go to like your brake fluid to your brakes, are you actually going to claim that because they're both hoses that somehow that means that they are magically like going to have the appropriate size clips to hold them on, and they're going to be the appropriate size and the appropriate length and all the same, and hook up at the appropriate locations and connect to all of the different parts like by themselves? Well, you could use the hose for something else. Therefore, in order for the hose to be in the right spot at the right time and connect to the right parts, that doesn't really explain anything. Yeah, I just don't understand how people actually think this is a remotely coherent explanation if you remove the intelligent agent from the equation. Like, could a mechanic take a hose from somewhere else and using different clamps and such potentially utilize one that's not specifically made for X function and use it? Probably. You might be able to jury rig, but that has nothing to do with whether or not you have explained where the freaking hose came from in the first place, nor the radiator, nor the engine, nor the tank, or whatever else that your different parts you're looking at, the rotors, everything else. Like, that's an entirely different context. And it's like Swamidass wants to say, oh, well, because you could have used these two parts, we don't need to even remotely have to consider how in the heck the components came into being. Like, oh, that just happened. That was just natural selection and mutation and such. Like, what? And then claim, oh, well, we're not claiming that it's just Darwinism. We're just Darwinian evolution and random mutation. Like, man.
I think you can even trace this stuff back over 150 years ago to Darwin's book, actually, ironically. But I mean, this has been a constant idea. The word is exaptation. The idea is that part of it might be developed for some reason, and then it gets co-opted or exapted to be used for another process. And to really be able to tell if something can evolve by evolutionary mechanisms, and broadly speaking, you really have to have a comprehensive view of not only its current function, but its past functions. Now, I don't know anyone, frankly, who has not even evolutionists that have a good handle of that on complex cases. Now, I mean, we have some hints and clues into it, but you can't make a strong claim about it's not involved unless you have that handle. So it seems to be then an argument that's really based on either a misunderstanding or silencing or whatever, or a misuse. I don't know how to explain it. Maybe you can clarify, Mike. I mean, I think it's kind of misleading to give that example when several other people have pointed out this issue of acceptation. You don't have to, just the fact that you take away one part here doesn't mean that it can't evolve. You also have to show that each of the things couldn't have been involved individually, and then come together later. And now you haven't done that with the mousetrap, and that's like a major logical gap that other people pointed out. That you know, when I see that, I just need a way. I'm just explaining how I'm responding to it. Okay, then I'm going to say, you know, when I see that, you know, I mean, I've looked very closely at your work on this, and I know what some of your responses are, but I also just heard what your summary was for everyone. And also what you said all the major critiques are. One of the major critiques is acceptation. And I was very surprised to hear that that wasn't actually in the list of the 3 things that you raised.
Right. So just to summarize, try for the non-specialist audience, there might be a process out there where these parts evolve separately, and then somehow, I'm not going to attempt to make a guess of how that would be, they came together and coordinated to serve a different function, right? That's generally kind of what we're discussing.
Yeah, and if you look at how design works, from even how human design,
may I jump in at some point?
Not designing things from scratch. We start with the things we put them together.
Swamidass just used human design to substantiate his position that acceptation is the explanation, but simultaneously claiming that there wasn't an intelligent agent taking action. Like Swamidass, do you not even realize what you just contradicted your own talking points by, because like what's the argument that Behe makes? You literally just try to use Behe's own position to negate his position. So like, what is Behe, Meyer, myself, what are we arguing? Oh, we look at all these different things and we say, there's no way that this could exist without the necessity of the foresight of an intelligent agent. Okay, fine. And then Behe's like, well, we co-opt different parts. Like that was, which is the example I was making about, you know, in my response to all this. Okay, so how are you claiming that Behe's position is false if you're going to use the exact same logic to support your position for acceptation? That doesn't make any sense.
So go ahead.
Yeah. So yes, please, Mike, respond to all that. Yep.
Okay. Josh, I can't believe that you read the work closely, because I addressed all those issues, starting from Darwin's black box, in each of my books and in blog posts, papers, and all sorts of other things besides. So when you say that you don't understand how I can give this example, how can you object to it if you haven't read my responses?
I did read your work.
Why did you tell the audience about that?
Objected how you presented it here.
In Darwin's black box, I says, okay, well, suppose you want to make something like a mousetrap, and so you go into the garage, and here's a tire iron that maybe you'll use as the holding bar, and here's a spring from a grandfather clock. Maybe you can use that as the spring for the mousetrap. And I said, but it's clear that you can't use those parts unless they are matched to each other. So saying that this one part arose for some other purpose, and yet we can use it for some other complex purpose without adjusting it, is not a serious proposal. I also wrote that we don't have to talk abstractly about these things. A lot of,
and real quick, to give it a layman example of what Behe's saying here. Okay, go to Home Depot. Go up on the aisle that has all the nuts and bolts. You have all these different sizes of nuts and bolts and washers. However, there's usually only one size nut that's going to spin on that bolt. And even though, other than being bigger and smaller than the one next to it, different sizes, they look basically the exact same, just reduction in scale. However, it doesn't matter if you have a nut and a bolt if they don't match and the threads won't align and enable you to tighten them down. That is an example of why I get so irritated with it. Oh, well, this protein looks very similar. It's just smaller, bigger, all this stuff. Like, I hear that all the time, and I'm like, okay. So going back to the earlier point I was making in relation to the mechanical function that we know beyond doubt that proteins are conducting, except in the Evo Atheist fantasy world, if that is the case, and we have three-dimensional structures that must fit with each other in order to perform said actions, just like gears, right? You're saying, oh, well, this gear and this organism is like 7 times larger than the corresponding gear in this other organism. However, because the sequence is pretty close, it must have just been evolution for some reason that led to the increase or decrease in scale. But you still need to have them at the right size in order for the two different proteins to work together for a protein-protein interaction, for example. But you're saying that it didn't necessarily always have to be the right size in order for the thing to not die. I mean, yeah, I don't really buy into that. I think you are making some serious assumptions that are not actually substantiated by real-time observations that we're observing with mutations that are resulting in crazy disease or very slight modifications to that scale that I'm referring to that result in death. So, I mean, you can make up all these hypotheticals as to how somehow the modification that Behe's referring to get it to be the right size could somehow be conducted. But when you remove the intelligent agent from the equation, it's suddenly not nearly as plausible as they try to put forth.
Evolutionary experiments have been done in the past 25 years or so. For example, my second book was about the development of chloroquine resistance to malaria. And I don't have time to get into the specifics, but there was an enormous number of malaria parasites in the world, an astronomical number, 10 to the 20th or more. Many, many, many more than the number of, say, vertebrates that exist in the world. And yet, when they were challenged with this lethal drug, chloroquine, they could have done anything they wanted to. They could have, exapted something. They could have duplicated some genes. They could do anything. And yet, at the end, when people determined how they had developed resistance to this drug, chloroquine, there were two little point mutations in a pre-existing protein. More recently, I talk in my book about experimental laboratory evolution, and almost uniformly, I should say uniformly, it's due to either the breaking or rearranging of pre-existing genes. There's no acceptation to make something new, certainly nothing of the complexity of the systems that I talked about.
But isn't rearranging existing stuff to make something new, isn't that actually literally the definition of acceptation? How is that not acceptation?
Well, there is no example. The only example that is—
You said rearranging. I'm just confused on a language level. I mean, I'm honestly confused. You said nothing except breaking or rearrangement of existing parts. But rearrangement is acceptation.
No, it isn't. Acceptation.
Okay, what's the difference?
Acceptation means you use, say, the spring from the grandfather clock in your garage
rearrange it from the grandfather clock
as the spring for the mousetrap. You can't say it's acceptation if you have to take something or something that looks like something else and extensively modify it to get it to work. So, for example—
Okay, I'm not familiar with this definition.
Well, read the books.
I've read the books very closely. I'm a biologist who's studied evolutionary science very closely.
In any event.
So, if Swamidass is not grasping this, I really am questioning whether he's actually read the books, because it's not that difficult to understand the points that are being made by Behe. He goes into great detail in his books to expound upon these points, gives examples and a plethora of supporting logic and evidence in favor of his positions. And Swamidass is playing the I don't know card. Like, I just don't understand what you're saying. Like, really? You're an MD PhD and you're not grasping the point that's being made in relation to all this? Like, come on, man. Come on, Swamidass. Don't play dumb here.
In the best laboratory evolution experiment that was done, no new molecular machines were seen in Richard Lenski's experiments with E. coli. As a matter of fact, the overwhelming number of mutations broke pre-existing genes, and that helped. And let me just add just one more point, and then I'll turn over the microphone. Josh says that, most biologists know that Darwin's theory, Darwin's mechanism isn't the only thing. I certainly know that too, but his two co-authors of my book, of the review of my book that appeared in Science magazine,
Nathan Lentz and Richard Lenski.
Yes, argues strongly for Darwinian principles. Richard Lenski is a very strong Darwinist. So there are, and I disagree with Josh. I think the majority of biologists, when they think of evolution, think of Darwinian processes. There are some who don't, but they haven't much made their case either.
I mean, that's interesting. I mean, Nathan's a good friend of mine, actually. We've talked about this. I also talked to Lenski about it too, but they know how I see this, and they didn't actually have any scientific objections.
Okay, so Swamidass is having the conversations with the researchers, but doesn't know that what Behe is saying is true. I mean, he's not. Well, they didn't contradict what you're saying, so that means that what you're saying is false. I mean, come on, man. Come on. This is painful.
That's what I was saying. I mean, maybe it's just different ways of expressing the same idea. I don't know. But I mean, we can let go of the precise term exaptation. You're saying that new functions can be arise out of rearranging existing parts. So if that's what you think, I mean, that's what I mean when I say exaptation. And so that's pretty interesting that you think that can happen too.
But not by chance, not without purposeful direction. I mean, if you're talking about rearranging, say, bones from a leg into bones for a flipper, which was one of the examples that you and your co-authors used in the review of my book, you can't say that these bones were just exapted and hey, now they're a flipper. There's lots and lots of things, intermediate steps, including lots and lots of molecular steps, which would have to take place. It strikes me that the phrase exaptation is being used as a magic wand. It sounds
like that you're kind of making the case for the evolutionists, though, because you're saying that there's a lot of intermediates that would be there. So if there's a lot of intermediates between point A and point B, that actually makes the story more plausible.
Okay, Swamidass, the point he's making is that the actually accomplishing all of those intermediary steps is not what's actually plausible. That, like, okay, if you were somehow able to accomplish all of this, then okay, fine. However, when you actually analyze what is necessary on the molecular level, it is not actually plausible to think that you're going to be able to get all of these steps to happen in a manner simultaneously, which is necessary to actually result in the end function. And obviously, as we're learning more and more about the master regulatory sequences and the interactions between all sorts of genes that are actually working in unison in order to accomplish many of these, supposedly simple evolutionary functions, they're actually executed through inter and intra chromosomal gene regulation, and the physical proximity of the gene is not actually to another one or to a regulatory component is not actually as significant as we thought, because it turns out that different regulatory functions that are millions of base pairs away are folded in three-dimensional space and time in order to express XYZ gene. And while this other one is also being expressed in a different manner, and we have the alternative splicing factors that we have, it's like when the data that we're now having to analyze in terms of what's the actual plausibility of going from step 1 to step 5,000 or step 20 million that would be necessary to get from point 1 to point 2. Like, this is not nearly as coherent and plausible as these guys try to make it out to be. And honestly wonder, given the fact that one of the things Swamidass does is computational biology, it's like, I know you understand the ridiculous amount of steps that would be necessary. But earlier you were trying to dismiss Haldane's dilemma and say that, we can just account for all that, when you can't. You have hypotheses, not actual substantiation of the positions that are being taken, other than massive assumptions.
I'm not sure
So yeah, maybe I can just jump in here, just because I can see the initial plausibility of saying, well, hey, yeah, we have these different parts, and maybe they could come together and coordinate to a new function. Now, I'll be honest, that does sound a little bit magical to me. Again, I'm a layman, so I'm not saying that that's an argument against it, but that would be pretty fantastic. however, once again, I'm not a molecular biologist, but when I've read the work and I've seen the examples of these molecular machines, they're not the type of thing. Let me say it this way: they seem very efficient. And correct me if I'm wrong there, but they seem very
Some of them are, not all of them, but some of them are.
Right. And if the process were really something of grabbing this part and this part that wasn't originally intended to coordinate to some larger thing, I would probably expect not things that are quite efficient, right?
Well,
like
what I
maybe
would say is that
clunky.
you're working from like a particular model in mind, but I'd say biology is somewhat that, but it's also something else too. Like another word picture to throw in there would be something like Legos. So and it's not a perfect analogy, but let me just give you some evidence behind that. Like if you look at chimpanzees and humans, we have essentially the same pieces.
I love it. You can see Behe over there. Like if you watch his facial expressions, you can see he's like barely be able to contain himself. When it's like, did this guy just compare nanotech machines, i.e., proteins, to Legos? He is analogizing the most advanced molecular technology in existence and being like, yeah, they work okay. They're kind of like something you could build with Legos. Oh yeah, man. So yeah, I got a set of Legos where I can create a motor that can spin at 10,000 RPMs, and yeah. I make it on Legos, bro. Totally, and it turns with rubber bands, man. Like that's how it happens. That's it. I mean, come on, man. It's just I don't understand how people actually take this kind of stuff seriously. If you take the time to go and look at like what a helicase does, what a motor protein does, like all these different things, like that crap, the tech is nuts, man. Go like ATP synthase. It's freaking nuts. It's amazing. It's incredible technology. And Swamidass is going to be like, oh, it's like Legos, bro.
There's slightly different interaction networks. There's slightly different point mutations. Mike even agrees that there's no molecular machines that humans have that chimpanzees don't, and that there's no
but that doesn't explain where they
biochemical
came from.
evidence.
But that doesn't explain where they came from. Even if you're using that to try to argue for common descent between chimps and humans, I don't care about common descent.
But that's I
only care about whether the molecular machinery required purposeful design or not.
No, this isn't an argument against purpose. This is rather making the statement that all the differences between us and chimpanzees, to first approximation, that's not the complete story, but it's a very big part of the story, is just slight rearrangement of parts, and that creates a very large difference.
Okay, so I love the slight rearrangement of parts. Well, cognitive gene expression. I have a paper in my folder of this. 30% difference in gene regulation, gene expression in human brains versus chimpanzee brains. I don't think that 30% is all that slight, if you ask me. And moreover, when you really, I've made this point many times. If you have a system that is built on the same framework, you're going to have ridiculous amounts of code that's going to look exactly the same. However, a relatively small percentage of the customized code on the framework can result in massively different end function and front end experience. That has in no way, shape, form, or fashion supports the premise that either one of them could just come into existence without a coder being necessary to write that 10% difference in code, or 5%, or 3%. It doesn't matter. You're still like, of course, the core of the operating system is going to be almost identical. That's not that, like, who cares about that? Yeah, I just don't understand how we live in an era of technology and computer science and programming, and people don't grasp this. Even people in the discipline don't understand this point. It's really irritating. I don't understand how you can possibly be doing this and live in the era in which we do, and somehow, other than being brainwashed and or desperate to not ruffle any feathers, to come to the conclusion that nothing could possibly question or potentially negate the plausibility of evolutionary theory.
between us and them. And I think God was involved in human evolution. So I'm not saying it's not purposeful and God didn't do it. I'm just saying that quite a bit can be done, stuff that we wouldn't expect. And it fits a little bit more the Lego analogy in that case. That's all I'm saying. It's a limited point. It's not an argument against God's involvement. That would be silly because I'm not arguing against God's involvement.
All right, let me just make two short points. The Lego analogy I really like, but you have to realize that Legos are put together by intelligent agents. They don't assemble themselves. The second thing is that you think that God was involved with the development of humans. How would you convince Nathan Lentz, your co-author on the review of my book, that that's a reasonable conclusion?
I'd start by agreeing with you. All three of us are in agreement that there is no biochemical case to be made for design in human evolution. All three of us agree with that. I would also agree, you see evidence for common descent from chimpanzees. We all agree with you. You, me, and him all agree. So how am I going to make the case that was God involved? Well, I would want to make that case. But let me just start with that common ground. That common ground builds a lot of trust. I hope I'm not misrepresenting you, but I think you actually agree with me on that. You mean most of your evidence comes from bacterial systems and yeast systems and malaria and all that. But in human evolution, you don't think that you can actually look and tell. So, but that doesn't mean God wasn't there and God didn't do something, right? It just means that those arguments are harder to make when you're looking at that distinction.
I understand. Yeah, I addressed that specifically in Edge of Evolution.
Yes, this is the point, like major common ground now. So let me agree with you. All right.
I said that there aren't any biochemical, but there certainly are behavioral and intellectual profound differences between people and primates. And that I said that some of these differences are also a mystery. There's no reason to think that Darwinian processes or other unguided, non-intelligent
you're not even letting me agree with you, and I'm trying to ask me how you're going off to something else. You're telling me how your point of view. You want me to know how I'm going to convince him. So I'm telling you, like.
So I'm going to predict that these I'm in agreement with you positions that Swamidass is saying without actually saying exactly what he agrees with him on. I would be very interested to see if here in a moment there's a massive pivot to why Behe's wrong in the position that he's putting forth right now. Let's see if I turn out to be correct.
That's a massive place of common ground that you actually have with Nathan Lentz, and I have with him too. Okay, and so let's just start with that common ground. And the next thing I would do is tell him the exact way I came to believe that. I would tell him that I encountered Jesus, saw the evidence that he rose from the dead. I came to believe and trust him. I came to trust Scripture when I see what Scripture teaches about humans, and it seems to make a great deal of sense that was God is involved. When you look at how different we are from other animals, even though we're so continuous with them, that paradox is a puzzle that has to be worked out. And this is something that scientists have been grappling with for a long time. And I think there are evolutionary accounts of it, but I'm not satisfied that any of them are the whole story. And so I don't have to disagree with any of those evolutionary accounts to say that maybe there's more to it. And that's essentially, your position, Mike. And I think that's a strong position.
I don't think we have the same position. I am looking for physical, biological evidence that some transformation or some biological feature required purposeful design. I don't think you're doing that. What feature between chimps and humans would you tell Nathan Lentz led you to believe that God was involved in making one from the other?
Well, I think I'm using evidence in a different way, because I can definitely point to very suggestive pieces of evidences about our differences. I think humans are, exceptional, or I don't want to say unique precisely, but there's something very different about us, and a very, it's a way it's hard to characterize, like what it means to be human. I don't think if aliens came to Earth, they'd be wondering, well, what does it mean to be a dog? I think they'd be wondering what's different about humans. They're not going to be wondering about what's different about cows or all that. They're going to be wondering about what's different about humans. I think that's objective. I think it's a little bit hard for scientists to appreciate that. He's written a book called Not So Different, where he gets into how we're very similar. And I would actually agree. We are far more similar than most people realize, but we're also far more different. And, language is a great example of that. You're a Catholic, you talk about the rational soul. That's a very solid reason. There's something that's happened. Even Chomsky, who was not a Christian, argued that there had to be a large step change in our language capacity. All that's there. Now, none of that proves that evolutionary mechanisms couldn't do it. But what we do know is that we have an N of 1. N of 1 is a statement that we say as scientists, where we just have one example of a species. If you look at great apes, we all started out at about the same place. And there's maybe 4 species of, ape/humans alive today.
Condition.
That should be a puzzle.
The final chapter of my last book, Darwin Devolved, was exactly about the differences in intelligence, in rationality, and so on between humans and other creatures. And I argued explicitly, I'm sure you remember, that Darwinism can't account for that. And if you deny you have a real mind, as many Darwinists
let's just slow
do,
down a bit to say
then you lose your grip on reality.
Behe is so nice. It's basically, I know you read this, or I know you know this, because I covered it in the end of my book that you claim I don't actually address these things, but you say you've read my books, and you and your buddy even wrote a review on one of my books. And earlier in this conversation, you claimed to have read my books. But then, yeah, I honestly really wonder how much a lot of these guys who make all these opposition points, I really wonder if they actually go down the rabbit holes to counter their supposed academic peers or just dismiss them. Because like a lot of things I've watched, I'm like, and I hear the talking points, and it's like, okay, how can I, as somebody who is not a PhD in XYZ topic, how can I know from reading that insert talking point is not actually substantiated? And you're the supposed expert, but you're not actually putting forth a substantive argument. It's very sad.
So I just want to mention that I have considered all of these topics, and
but look, I just want to
come to different
that this is a
conclusions.
strong philosophical argument to consider, or like a suggestive thing, but it's not actually an airtight scientific argument. There's particular rules in science, and this doesn't actually satisfy it. It's an N of one, like I said, and I don't think that that's a problem. I just think it's something that God's put there that's just a puzzle for us to figure out. I don't think science can.
I love how the life exists, therefore the probability is one. And in this case, it's the probability is that one exists because of evolution, and that's the only way that it could have happened. It's like, so you're accusing anybody else of circular reasoning and things of that nature, but you're saying that because life exists, therefore my position must be the reason that this is correct. And even though there's improbabilities must be accounted for, because it exists, my model must be the one that resulted in this. Like, and you don't see the incredible circularity in your position there? Interesting.
Give a complete answer to this question.
So just to, I'm sorry, finish your thought, Josh, and then I'll.
I don't think it can give a complete answer. I think that to say that all answers are inadequate may be true, but it's also true that there's legitimacy to some of the answers it's given. So for example, like Behe and I would both agree, Mike would both and I would agree that we share common ancestry with the great apes. That's part of the story. There's legitimacy to that, even though I think both Mike and I would agree, and I think even Nathan Lentz would agree that that's not the whole story. And so we're kind of left really with a grand mystery that we're all trying to figure out. And is God in that mystery? I think he's not just in the mystery, he's also in the reality that we found. I mean, I think there's something very suggestive that God was involved.
Well, I try to restrict myself just to the biology. And as I've explained in books and articles, I think common descent is true, but I think common descent is trivial, because all it says is that some ancestor in the past had some traits, and now some descendants have it, maybe even different kinds of descendants. But it doesn't say where it came from, and it doesn't say how fantastic changes might have occurred in descending species. And that's particularly true with humans. Hey, maybe we have biochemical pathways and other things in common with other primates, but that doesn't explain where they came from in the first place. And it doesn't explain how humans have come to be the only rational species, the only thinking species, the only species with a real mind on the planet. So it really doesn't say anything at all.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say anything, but I would say I would agree. Let's just say there's like two extremes. It doesn't say anything, it's not adequate to explain. So it does say something about it. It does not explain everything. Okay, I think that seems to be a very self-evident reality. It does not explain everything. Anyone who says that evolution explains all of this is not correct. To say that it doesn't explain anything is just about as extreme.
There are a large number of biologists, including, well, I don't want, but there are a large number of common biologists who would say, or who would lead the public.
So at the beginning of this debate, didn't Swamidass make the point that 99% of biologists would, or the vast majority of biologists would not agree with Behe? but then now he's flipping and saying not exactly the opposite, but kind of a different spin on that point to try and, I mean, it's like, come on, man. Did you forget that you took basically the polar opposite position 45 minutes ago? Come on now.
To believe that, in fact, evolution, or in particular Darwinian unguided, unintelligent
So, I would
processes,
just say that that's not,
do explain all of
I mean,
life.
depending on exactly what's being said, but if they're saying that evolution explains everything, that's not correct. I don't think the answer is to make another false claim.
Right.
Look,
Yeah.
another way, the really good analogy that I heard from one of my friends at Peaceful Science, who's a scientist, is that, we all believe that, the American Revolution occurred, but we can't retrace the steps of every single soldier along the way. Because so when we talk about the history of the American Revolution, it's not a total history. It's only part of the story. It doesn't give us fine-grained detail, and we can generate large places of large amounts of information. We can draw attention to that by just asking detailed questions. And in the end, we can't really rule out that God wasn't walking among the soldiers. Like, we can't rule out a lot of things that God was doing because we just have such a limited view of the past. And I think you take that analogy, and I think it actually works really well to explain the gaps in our biological knowledge in the past, where we can get some view about where things have happened, but we don't really know how a lot of it happened at the fine-grained detail of knowing how soldiers, walked the paths during the American Revolution,
I think
order of mutations, things like that.
I think that's why Darwinism is such an impediment to science. Because people say, hey, we don't know how something happened in the past. It's really complicated. So we'll just assume that.
No, that's not what we do. We say, so now we're going to form theories about it happen and test it.
By the way, and when we do go to test it, we have to test it at the molecular level, because unlike Darwin, we now know that genetic information is encoded in a molecule, and the molecular machinery is the foundational level of life. And there is no experiment that shows undirected processes can do anything like building the molecular foundation of life.
I mean, I don't want to call you Behe, Mike. It's because your name is common and your last name is Behe. I'm sorry, I mean no disrespect. But Mike, here's the thing. I mean, there's no scientific way to even tell if a process is directed or not. So if we produce I don't know how to tell if God directed the process in my experiment or not. There's no way to do that. Mm-hmm. And the way you represent this is actually something that I believed.
Dang it. Went on a good rant and forgot. George, you distracted me with your super chat. I forgot. George, thank you so much. Says, looking at the calm ocean, blue sky, fresh air, and without pizza, but plenty of friends and wine, this is freedom. Well, George, I know that being without pizza is a hard thing. And but I'm glad you're being able to enjoy some ocean, and I do hope that real freedom will return at some point. But sorry, everybody, for muting myself. So the point I was making with what was I saying about this? I don't know. I forgot what I was saying about the debate. We'll continue.
When I first read your book, but then I actually spent time with biologists and actually started to spend time. They found out it just wasn't true. Isn't that okay? Because it could happen, we don't care, and we're just going to accept it. What they do is, they start proposing different hypotheses and testing them, and it gets really interesting. And that's what I've really enjoyed, honestly, about studying, evolutionary science literature. Not because I think evolution can explain everything, but because by that hypothesis testing approach, they're revealing parts of how God created. They're certainly never going to explain everything. I wouldn't expect anyone to be able to explain everything. That's like expecting God-like omniscience from this very limited human effort. And as I understood it, what science really was showing us, and how limited it really was, I came to see how actually all the people you're critiquing, Mike, about who have gone out publicly and overstated the claims of evolution, I actually agree with you on that. I think they have overstated. I just, instead of rather making the extreme argument the opposite way, I'd rather just kind of be more, kind of take the part that actually acknowledges the legitimacy of both sides, and maybe also kind of acknowledge.
So what Swamidass just said there is, I don't really like taking much of a definitive position if it's not like in the middle. So I'm not really in favor of like irritating either side. So I'm just going to try and play Switzerland and act like there isn't actually anything definitive that, but well, I'm going to play both sides to an extent. I'm going to lean a little bit more in favor of the establishment, but then I'm going to occasionally like poke my toe in the pool on the other side to like, placate some people. But then if the pressure gets too much on the other side, then I'm going to, I'll throw the other guys under the bus. It's no big deal. We'll just kind of play both sides against the middle.
Just kind of how both sides have overstepped, and maybe more true to where the evidence is really telling us.
So yeah, let me hop in here real quick, because even what you just said, Josh, would have been very surprising to me a while ago, because
Really?
I was under that assumption that it's taken care of, it is explained. Again, not being a biology major, but having taken my biology courses in high school and stuff like that, that was the general impression that I had no reason to really question it. I'm not saying that's everybody's impression, but that was mine, right? Now, I'm not saying your position is unreasonable, but we don't have to name names for people who aren't here to.
Well, I would also just point out my view is not controversial.
Yeah, or controversial. I'm not saying that, but without naming names, there are popular level authors who do continue to give that impression, right, on the Darwinian paradigm, right? And I think
he says his position is not controversial. Go figure, Switzerland.
We all agree on that, but it's important for my audience who might not have a dog in this fight. This is the first time they've heard any type of thing on, who might have had a similar impression as me of the science is settled. If you even question any aspect of this, you're either extremely ignorant or insane. That type of rhetoric, right? Now, I know we're running out of time here, so if we have to cut this off, we can just close the final thoughts. But arguments for conscience, very interesting. From intentionality and things like that. I think they're great. I think they work. That's what convinced me. But Mike has insisted that his case is an empirical case. It's not a case from philosophy, nature, or something like that. And that you would argue, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Mike, that the best of the empirical evidence we have right now counts against the, would you say, mainstream Darwinian understanding? Is that fair to say? And then,
Yes.
and then
maybe just say mainstream account instead of mainstream Darwinian, because we wouldn't agree with Darwinian.
Mainstream account. I'm fine with that. The mainstream account. But
the mainstream account is Darwinian.
I disagree.
Put the terminology aside. I don't think that's going to hang us up here. Where is he without getting, and we covered exaptation. You two went back and forth on that. I guess what I would expect is if the mainstream account was more robust, I guess what I would expect is more of a refutation, if I'm just being honest. And I'm not saying there isn't a refutation. I'm just saying, from my initial impressions and reading the work and going back and forth through critiques, I have to say I'm frequently underwhelmed by the responses of people to Mike's arguments or stuff like that I feel like should be able to bury this thing, quite frankly. If there are,
have you read Draper's response?
I have Draper. He's a philosopher I very much respect.
Have you read Flanagan's response?
So Flanagan.
Hang on. So when Pat Flynn is asking for more substantive response to the molecular arguments that are being put forth by Behe, Swamidass says, have you read Draper and Plantinga? What? He's asking for substantive response from the supposed experts that are debunking Behe's arguments, not philosophers. What? My goodness, that is, I did not anticipate that one coming.
William Lane Craig's response and why he disagrees.
So
William Lane
I don't think Craig does disagree.
He does. I mean,
not with Behe's, from what I remember, and in where the conflict. And
Josh, have you read my?
Okay. Draper, Plantinga, William Lane Craig. Have you read their responses to Behe? Not a single one of those individuals, in spite of their intellect, in spite of their credentials, they're not biochemists nor biologists. They're philosophers. Why would that be who Swamidass is saying you should go and read if you're going to be debunking biochemistry arguments? That makes no sense. I really don't follow that one. That was, I did not pick up on that the first time I heard this. Wow.
Response to Draper. And
yeah, of course I have.
Okay.
Okay, I mean, okay, and not only that, I'm just telling you
So-
that.
so-
real quick, let me-
read my-
Let me
Like,
finish. Let me finish my point real quick, because the last thing I read from Flanagan, it was in Where the Conflict Really Lies. Has there been something more recent from that on Flanagan?
No, that's what I'm talking about. I'm also talking about Bill Craig stuff. He recently published a Peaceful Science about this. I mean, I think that it was on EPS meeting 2 years ago. He explained where he disagreed. Like, I think that and I'm just telling you that there are, like, this is a big public debate where there's a lot of uninformed people engaged. There's also a lot of experts that are pissed off and throwing snipes at one another that are not informed. Okay. I don't think that any of that stuff really matters. Like, frankly, even if everyone hates ID, but they make a solid argument, I think ultimately they're going to win the day.
Yeah.
And what really matters is the scientists that have respectfully engaged with them. And I think that, you have to actually be able to filter through a lot of really bad responses to find the good ones.
Oh, I certainly agree with that, and that's why I look to people not just like Flanagan, but Draper, right?
So, for example, I would be really curious to hear what you think about the short series I wrote about Irreducible Complexity and how that addresses it. I can give you the link to that afterwards. Maybe you can post it alongside that. I've asked Mike to respond to it, but he hasn't. I mean, maybe he will. But I'd be really curious to hear how you read that. And I wrote it to be understandable to someone just like you.
Right. I haven't read that yet, so I'm not going to speak on it, but I will link it. Mike, I don't know if you wanted to offer any remarks about that now or.
Yeah, I do. It's that the machinery that I discussed in Darwin's Black Box is really, really impressive, the flagellum and so on. But people like Draper and like Flanagan and others took it to be a philosophical argument, saying you can't rule out a pathway by which we can, put this thing over there and come over and end up with this. It's supposed to be a scientific argument that this is not a good explanation for the complex machinery we got. In my most recent book, Edge of Evolution, I reduced the complexity down to the tiniest example of cooperation between some biochemical parts that we can. A technical term, it's called a disulfide bond. And I ask, how do you get just a disulfide bond to evolve where it wasn't before, where maybe it might do some good? And I showed that evolutionists, Darwinists, a guy named Eugene Koonin is a prominent scientist, don't have a clue how even such a small cooperative thing could have evolved. And in my book, I also make up a new principle that I call the principle of comparative difficulty. And that says that if one thing is too hard to do, if an easier thing is too hard to do, then a harder thing is certainly going to be too hard to do. If somebody can only jump 3 feet high, given his best effort, you'd be foolish to bet money that he could jump 6 feet high on the next time. So Darwinists and the consensus view that that is you often hear. Just a sec.
Math to biology.
That you often hear.
Hold on. Let's let Mike finish, and then Josh, we'll give you time to respond.
Essentially, it's bluster. It's all bluster. Nobody can explain the flagellum. Nobody can explain anything simpler than a flagellum. Whenever there is anything that requires cooperative interactions, that's where Darwinism and, frankly, all these other evolutionary mechanisms that Josh thinks is important, that's where they all fail. I try to keep the focus on that in my book, but if Darwinists, if evolutionary biologists can't explain how a disulfide bond could arise, they can't explain pretty much anything of the molecular machinery of life.
Okay. Well, I know we're already over time. So
I'm going to be very, very brief, and then we got to probably end.
Yeah, and then we'll do final thoughts. Yeah, thank you. Yep.
I'll just be very, very brief here. I mean, I think that's really exciting what you said, honestly, Mike, because it turns out that, I'm a mathematical biologist. I'm a computational biologist. I learned how to do this. And what's going on here is actually just a misunderstanding on the math. And it turns out that these are actually really understandable. We can actually directly observe some of this stuff in actual experiments. And there's something called the birthday paradox, which is kind of crazy. That's where the math went wrong in your stuff. So it's the same thing that just arises on how likely it is that there's 2 people in the same room that have the same birthday. And so these sorts of things, they're very subtle. I mean, I'm not saying that you're being dishonest. Like, honestly, if you're not trained the way I was.
The whole 2 people in the same room having the same birthday is so freaking obnoxious of how naive that position is. Okay. So we have 1 million people inside of a room, gigantic room. It is totally plausible that there will be 2 people that were born on the same day. However, it is not plausible that those 2 people will have been born on the same day in the same year, both be left-handed, both be 5 feet 5 inches tall, and weigh 170 and 125 pounds exactly, respectively. And they're going to be the one. Those two people are going, out of the million, are going to be standing directly next to each other and facing each other so that they can grasp hands perfectly. Oh wait, and they also have both have blonde hair. Or actually, one has blonde hair and green eyes. The other one has blonde hair and blue eyes. And if any of those parameters are not correct, then you fail. Oh wait, we needed not just two next to each other. We needed to have 75 different pairs of people that all have different birthdays or the same birthday and all those other parameters I just talked about that match up specifically. And out of the million people, they must all be in line next to each other, not just in the same room. They must be next to each other. And all I got to say is, at that point, if you're going to argue that it's remotely plausible that's going to happen through undirected process, you are living in a fantasy land, and then be claiming like, oh, I did the math on this. Like, yeah, dude. Uh-huh. Yeah, they had the same birthday, but you didn't factor in all the other variables of like same year, same time of day, like all these different things you could be doing. Like, is there, I guess you could claim that that's plausible, but you're actually going to say that that happened for millions of different genes. I don't buy that, man. Like, you're straight up just living in a fantasy land of projection. It's hilarious.
You would just miss these things. And they're the sort of thing that maybe even Kunin misses, because like he's not a computational biologist already. And there's ways to actually make sense of this. You just may not be familiar with that literature, and that's okay. I'm happy to get into that. And I think that's actually what's been the most.
Yeah, Eugene Kunin, H-index 266, he hasn't thought about the math, even though they've done the math on the improbabilities of different factors. You're claiming that a guy who's like way up the food chain published on this topic, you're claiming that he didn't have one of his team members check his math for the past 30 years? Like, do you condescend much, Swamidass? Like, do you think that everybody else is just dumb and like, I do computational biology, therefore you probably don't understand this? And it's like, well, dude, do you understand the biology and the chemistry that's having to be conducted here before you claim that it's like just did? It's crazy, man. I can't take this seriously sometimes. And I hate the fact that Swamidass is like, I don't hate the fact that he's a Christian. I hope he is a Christian, saved and everything. But in the context of the standard talking points that we're hearing, it's like, I don't care. That's not plausible. It's the same thing as saying that, oh, like, there isn't enough probabilistic resources for, all this other stuff to happen that needs to precede this. There's not enough potential probability available or enough actions available. But you just don't understand the math when like many PhD mathematicians have done the math and agree. But you guys are the ones that claim that, oh no, there's just something you don't understand. I mean, come on, man.
Most exciting, what has kept me engaged in this conversation for so long, about how it ends up pointing to really interesting science in that. And that's the part that I don't want to miss out on. Go ahead, you can kind of give us, and that could be my last thought actually. How about that? You want to have last thought, Mike?
Yeah, so let's see. Final thoughts here, and we'll wrap this up, and I'll make sure we also get to mention all the other work that you guys do before we say goodbye.
Okay, well, just tell the listeners that, as you might expect, I don't agree with Josh in very, very many things. He doesn't agree with me. So I would encourage everybody to read for yourself these arguments and come to your own conclusions. As I said before, it's been a case a number of times in the history of science that the entire scientific establishment has been wrong. This is another case where they are wrong, and I try to present the evidence as clearly as I can, and I try to rebut the objections as clearly as I can. I actually have a new book coming out in a month or so called A Mousetrap for Darwin, which collects all of my responses to critics such as Josh and other people over the years. So if you're interested in my take on the nitty-gritty of all this, that'd be a good place to start.
Okay. Well, I want to thank both. This has been a spirited discussion, but I think it's been a fruitful discussion. And
did you learn anything?
Yeah. Hey, I seriously, honestly, that's why I have you on. I think me, along with my listeners, that's why we have these discussions. We just want to know what's true at the end of the day, right? And That's and if nothing else, I just feel like these discussions deserve to be discussed, and I want to get people who I think can represent both sides intelligently and charitably. So I want to thank you both for doing that. And I like energy. I like a little spirit and passion in it. So I thank you both for bringing that as well. I'd love if we could all go out for a beer, or I'd
than me, and you're it's a privilege for you to talk to me. I'm really glad we were able to talk about this.
And so before we go, I want to make sure, Josh, if you wouldn't mind, maybe just giving a brief rundown of this book, and then, like I said, I'd love to schedule a time maybe for you to come back on. We could just talk about that.
Sure. So you're talking about the genealogical Adam and Eve.
I am sorry, I lost the jacket. It doesn't look as pretty.
Mike, have you read it yet? Would you be willing to take a read? I've read 3 of your books, so you read one of mine.
I'd be happy to read it. I'm sorry I haven't done so yet, but I will.
All right, so do me a favor. Would you read it and like post an article at EMB or let me know? I'd love to know. Would you promise me to do that?
Yeah, will do.
I think you might agree with me on some things. We disagree a lot, but we agree a lot. I mean, I think this book shows how consistent with mainstream science without having to challenge it. I mean, you can challenge it too if you want to. It doesn't require you to accept it, but consistent with mainstream science, consistent with the idea that we share common descent with the great apes. Adam and Eve could have been specially created as recently as just 6,000 years ago, and they'd be ancestors of all of us. They could have been, created without parents. All that would have, and it ends up to be actually, essentially,
All right, I think I will just end that here. Okay, so if people want to hop in, we can have a little open mic discussion before we wrap things up. People come in pretty quick. We'll keep going. Otherwise, I will call it a night and actually get a good night's sleep. So link is coming into the side chat right now. Here you go. Now available. So I don't know what you guys thought. I mean, it was kind of interesting back and forth between the two of them. And like I said, I just feel like Swamidass, like most of the evolutionary advocates over there that don't actually, they don't really address the arguments that are made other than with blanket dismissals and, oh no, that's already accounted for type thing. And then when it's like, well, back it up, they don't, or it's, a misdirection or a very, it's like, well, we kind of sort of came up with an idea for how this could have happened. We haven't necessarily proven that what our imagination has come up with could actually happen, but I'm just going to use that as enough to dismiss whatever position you're taking. And in the context of all that, it's like, it's whether you want to go OEC, YEC, whatever. It doesn't matter to me in relation to what is actually plausible. There's a reason that my channel name is Logical, Plausible, Probable, because in my opinion, in order for you to have a sound worldview, the different components that you utilize to frame your worldview and whatever the foundation of it is must, and the different things that create that foundation, must be both logical and probable and plausible. Otherwise, if you're missing any of those components, then you have not actually substantiated your position, and therefore you're actually operating from a very assumptive perspective, which is why I find it so ironic that people like myself are accused of being blinded by faith and God of the gaps and such, when I am actively searching for the support of my positions from a all 3 of those factors, the LPP. And that's why I say, like, your arguments better be down with LPP, because if they're not, then you're not actually putting forth something that is relevant and reasonable to be discussed or actually considered with any level of seriousness. It's like, man, what are we even arguing over here, folks? It's getting ridiculous. What's up, Andrew? Welcome to the stream. How you doing?
Not too bad. I've been watching it, so yeah.
What did you think?
I thought it was very interesting. I thought Michael Behe was more of an atheist than a theist, but now he's trying to claim a theist.
Who, Behe?
Yeah, I thought that isn't that what he was trying to claim?
No. You talking about Behe or Swamidass?
Yeah, Behe.
No. He's a
out and out atheist.
No, Behe's not at all. What are you talking about?
I wasn't certain. I wasn't certain. So I'm asking the question.
No, Behe's I believe he's Roman Catholic, but no, he's a very active intelligent design advocate, and in relation, he's not No, in no way, shape, form, or fashion is he an atheist.
Oh, okay. I've always confused him as an atheist. Maybe that's just something I haven't checked out.
Yeah, no, he's not. Now in his books and different things, he doesn't argue from a creationist perspective. He is just like in his books, he tries to keep it very, just on the scientific level, and not even getting into the theological aspects of it. It's
Okay, well that would make sense why he wrote the Ford of Darwin on Trial that I have.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, I mean, it's when you read, like, I don't know if you've read his books, like Behe's books, but
no, I haven't read Behe's book. No, the only things that I've read, anything remotely, what's the word I want? Theologically, things like Sproul and a couple of Lennox. So,
gotcha. Yeah, Behe's books are basically about biochemistry and evolutionary theory, and that's it.
Yeah. Like
I don't think.
So.
Yeah, I don't. I'm trying to remember. I don't quote me 100% on this, but I mean there may be some allusion at some point in one of the books. But from my memory of them, theology is never even being addressed in any of his books. It's just a straight up. Let's look at the science. Let's look at the chemistry. Let's look at what would actually have to happen in order for these different talking points to be, coherent, and actually, what's actually been proven, what's actually been shown to be true versus what has been assumed to be true, and what has been inferred to be true versus what has actually been proven to be true.
Proven and accepted, yeah.
Right. Well, and for all the atheists out there that go play the semantic games and definitionary, I don't mean proof from like a mathematical proof perspective. I'm using it in the colloquial sense of that there's empirical evidence to support whatever the end position is.
You mean proof as in like a court of law proof?
Exactly. Unlike
beyond reasonable doubt, but not all doubt. Reasonable.
Exactly. Yeah, he's amazing. You have to issue those caveats, otherwise atheists will go bonkers. And you didn't say proof. What do you mean by proof? Versus actually looking at the actual logic of it.
Yeah, they won't see it from a lawyer's point of view. And since I'm the son of a lawyer and a nurse, well,
Yeah, it's great. Let's see. Lena says Behe's books are difficult to read for non-native speakers. Sanford is much better at style. Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you that Behe's books, I mean, I enjoyed them tremendously, but yeah, you definitely have to pay attention. Like, you can't just skim through the books and not, otherwise you'll miss a tremendous amount of, the substance of what's actually being argued. Same thing with Stephen Meyer's books. Your knowledge base is also very important too. Like, I reread Signature in the Cell last month. The first time I read it was probably, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago. And I reread Signature in the Cell again. And obviously my knowledge base of biology has tremendously improved in that time frame. So there was a whole bunch of different arguments and components that were being put forth that I was not aware of the first time I read it. Now I am. And it's like, oh, okay. The significance of the point, the arguments being made is even bigger than it was. The argument hasn't changed, obviously, but my recognition of the argument was dramatically increased just because of my increase in knowledge.
Well, we can all do with increasing our knowledge, I think so.
I would agree. It's amazing how so many people seem to want to just like stay in a very stagnant state in terms of their knowledge base. Why would I go and read XYZ? Like, I don't know. You don't want to expand your mind and your positions and potentially, modify your, the stance that you take on, XYZ concept because you don't like, are you afraid to go and learn something new? Like, is that where we're at here in terms of challenging the status quo or people's worldviews? I don't know what you think about that.
If you're asking an Aspie, which you are, and if I was before I was diagnosed, I would have said, yes, I would be willing to change. But as an Aspie, and knowing my past, no, I probably would be uncomfortable with the change.
Well, that's fair. That's fair.
So, you know, I don't like being made out to be something I am not.
That's a fair point. I get that. But I think in line with what I'm saying, though, is you wouldn't necessarily run around telling the person who had read XYZ that you have not read that they must be wrong by default when you have not read it yourself, right? Or known about XYZ. And I think that's the differentiation point, right? In terms of what I'm talking about here.
But
a lot of these Evos freely admit they have, like in this context, they've never read one of Behe's books, for example. But then I know beyond doubt that he's wrong. Well, have you read the argument? No. Well, then how do you know that he's wrong? Oh, because so-and-so said he was wrong. So you don't actually know if what so-and-so said about why he was wrong actually proves that he was wrong, because you don't even know what the argument was that the other guy says he's wrong about. You know, and you like start going through all those rabbit holes. It's like, oh, hang on. So you're now telling me that I'm wrong, even though I have read the argument and I've read the supposed counter argument from the other guy. And my conclusion is that the other guy did not actually negate the position that the other dude made. But you're telling me that I'm wrong because the other guy who you have not read said that the other guy was wrong. Like that's what we're at. And
well, that would be like my brother's birthday about he's 30 years he's 35 now, so about 5 years ago now. I was talking about Christianity, and the whole thing grounded on me that I was talking only religion. And then amongst the conversations was, well, you don't want to be having an argument because he's a physicist and you won't win that argument.
Right. Yeah.
Which was crap. Dismissed
by default, right?
Yeah. And this is coming from my brothers who are ex-Christians themselves. So I've spoken a lot about them to you and a lot of people as well. But
well, I know they're kind of don't even breach the subject with them, right? At this point.
Yeah. Don't even mention the word religion.
Yeah, it's interesting. What's up, Alec? How you doing, man? Welcome to the stream.
Not much, LPP. How you doing, Andrew?
Well, how are you, Alec?
Very good, very good. I'll interject with Behe's books are not easy for anybody with a PhD degree to read. They're put in layman's terms mostly, and they're pretty actually easy to read, and that's phenomenal for a biologist, you know, that's able to separate and go down to reading level for majority of people. So I don't know what Swamidass had a problem with.
Alec, I'd agree with you that he made it understandable, but I'm saying, like, I guess the point I was more making is if you don't understand the basics of biochemistry, just some of the core functions that are having to occur, I could see how it would seem more difficult, as well as you know, there's a very macro point. There's very large scale points that are being made and are throughout the story arc of the book. Like there's multiple sub points right throughout the whole thing that he's like putting together into a tapestry. But I think if you're not being able to connect dots, it would be very difficult to comprehend the points that he's making. That's what I would say.
I mean, the whole fault of Swamidass is he kind of throws these kidney punches every once in a while. Like, is it intentional? Yeah, I think it is, because he does it all the time. It's kind of like it's a backhanded compliment, if you will. It's oh yeah, I agree with you, and then 10 seconds later he'll say something totally anti what you just said.
I think he's quite a bully.
All right, androgynous LPP. You talking Swamidass as a bully? No, he's a narcissist, bro.
No, he's a mean man.
Yeah, narcissist. Yeah, he's fully about himself.
No. I'm sorry, but you're just wrong, Mr. Alec.
That's fine. I hope he can hold this voice for a while. It's not, I know one guy who puts a paperclip on his tongue when he does his other voice. It's hilarious.
Since,
Yeah, does that?
since I know who this person is,
Don't
I'm also very
don't tell, please.
I'm also very fascinated to see how long you can pull this off.
I'm
You're wavering in your
Pat
voice.
Maddox. Pat Maddox. I'm John's sibling.
Hey, so in all seriousness, are you actually Brenda? Is that your alter ego?
That's
You know
my
what I'm
twin.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Because this voice sounds like Brenda.
This is just a gay voice. Happy, you know.
I'm
So,
glad you conditionalized that one. Yes.
so did you take the water to your significant other?
Yes. Yes, I did. I said, listen, dear, I'm bringing you just a delightful little cup of purified spring water, run 3 times through our Brita filter, and then a couple of perfectly shaped ice cubes dropped blip, blip, right into the glass and just dropped on into my honey's hands.
You know, that's totally destroying the purpose of mineral spring water, right?
Listen, don't get sassy, sciencey with me, mister.
That's all right. I'll give you the chemical equation of it later.
You can take your math and shove it up your booty.
That's not math. It's a chemical equation. It has nothing to do with math.
It's all chemistry, you dumb.
So in all seriousness, androgynous, were you, while you were helping to that other individual to transition, did you somehow manage to like realize that you actually were a different gender?
You know my story, but what happens is you take a lot of narcotics given to you by your doctor, and it naturally strips all the testosterone out of your body just naturally over the years.
Well, then how did you end up bald?
That is another form of testosterone that calls male pattern baldness, and I don't have that at all.
Oh, okay. So the male pattern baldness I'm undergoing right now is indicative that I have too much testosterone. That makes sense.
Exactly. You're quite the little bull.
Oh man. Well, it's
Awkward.
yes. So in all seriousness though, the
Toodaloo. I must
Are
go
you-
now.
okay,
Toodaloo.
well thanks for stopping by, androgynous.
All right.
Appreciate
Goodbye, androgynous. I like it.
it. That was
Wow.
pretty funny.
Talk about a curveball from right field. Jeez.
Yeah, that was unexpected.
I know who that is, and they're spoofing.
Oh yeah, I can kind of guess who it was. That's all right. Never mind.
Trying to give away was the voice. That's still a tough one to adjust to because there's a Australian network presenter who I like to listen to who was a man, transitioned into a woman, and still has the man's voice. And when you look at it, it's like, yuck, that's a man.
Well, listen, they identify as a.
Yeah.
What's up, Dr.
Yeah.
Kenny? How you doing?
Doing pretty good, man. Doing pretty good. Just laying there with the old wifey, got up to get some water and decided I'd just, turn on the old YouTubes and see who was live, and saw you guys. Want to say hi?
Well, I appreciate that.
Hey, Kenny.
What did
Hey,
you
guys.
were you
Hey,
able
Kenny.
to watch the review?
Not really, no. Just the first part, doze off a little bit. Second part, make a couple snarky comments. You know how that is.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So you were so Smokey Saint has transitioned into a sister saint.
Yeah. Yeah, I finally got through to him. He's turned his bad into right, and has followed the way of the sisterhood.
Well, that's I'll be interested. I'll be interested to see how long before there's a detransition.
Who knows? He was gay to begin with, so I don't
Well,
know.
it's better to be a nun than to be all.
I agree.
What's up,
Sounds
Jamie?
a
How
little
you
bit
doing,
like
man?
Jesus.
Yeah. What's up, Jamie? How are you?
All things to all people.
So
There's neither Jew nor Greek nor.
Jew don't know nothing.
You don't know what
I know, man. You don't know what I know.
I'm not
Yeah,
talking to you.
How you
You're
been?
crazy.
Loki, he last night he really was sorry. He was loving to me. It was so nice. It was beautiful. It ended so nicely.
I know. Didn't you guys like share communion together? And
Yeah,
then
yeah.
missed.
We
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh man, did you and
We broke
Smokey
bread.
finally did you guys finally reconcile?
Yeah, that robe really is like what the nuns wear anyway. So he was really easy for him to transition into the sisterhood, being gay, and but he did have to break up with Jamie, which causes him a lot of hardship, and Jamie as well. He's still going through it.
Yeah.
You doing all right, Jamie? I
I'm
know
good.
you had a.
It turns out I don't have a brain tumor, so that's good.
Do you
Yeah.
still
Oh yeah.
struggle?
So did you actually go get a test done, Jamie?
Yeah.
Okay. Did they come up with anything? I mean, I know you don't.
No,
have a brain tumor,
it was just my the antibiotics ended up working, so it was just a incisor abscess that was really weird.
It was his overreaction and hypochondriac symptoms. I have the same issues.
Yep.
I came down. I
Yeah,
came down with spontaneous human combustion syndrome.
Oh,
I
yeah.
woke up dead last year.
In all seriousness, I
I
had
know.
a buddy. I had a buddy who just died from an abscess tooth. It just got too much and went straight to his brain. Click, done.
Mm.
Yeah, you know what they say: if the guns don't kill you, your teeth will.
They say that? I never heard that one.
Yeah, right. No, the guns are the leading killers in the USA. Second is abscess incisors.
I thought it was always heart attack until COVID took over.
I read you, Kenny. I read you.
Thank you, Jamie.
I got it. Yeah.
Thank you.
I thought it was. I could have sworn I'm a painter, and I thought it was ladders.
Yeah, it really is amazing how magically all these very normal causes of death just vanished last year. Did y'all notice that? Like people got smashed over.
They got absorbed or whatever.
People like jumped out of 30-story buildings and then didn't die of suicide. It's really amazing. Like
COVID.
it wasn't impact. It wasn't impact on the concrete from falling 30 stories. It was something totally different. Like, oh, the guy got shot in the face. No. It wasn't. The bullet was not the cause of death. No. It's,
Yeah, test him and say
Positive for COVID.
Yeah, instead of macing anybody, just get a bottle full of Vax.
Kenny, are you going to straighten these boys out and tell them COVID is a serious deal here?
The mycoronavirus has killed probably 207 million people thus far on Venus and Earth.
Hey, listen, did you not
Sorry, I'm
get
not
the
supposed to say it, am
memo?
I?
Hey, did you not get the memo from President Biden? He said it was 330 million people died.
Oh.
So listen, I'm gonna need you to get your
calculators
stats
out.
correct, okay?
Well, he's going to have the correct information because he's already naturally inclined to be spacey. So he has a direct contact with Venus already.
Well, there could be with all the illegal immigrants coming in. You don't know.
Yeah. I think he's confused. He's equivocating the words alien and alien.
That's
well,
right.
actually,
You throw Katy
Kenny,
Perry in, and then there's this tension going on.
Actually, Kenny, I don't know if you're aware of this, but under his administration, the term alien has been erased, literally. I'm not making this up, from all of the the handbooks and the communication protocols.
Yeah, they're
for,
spelling it with an E now, huh?
No, it's just immigrant.
Oh, I thought it was immigrant.
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 Well,
Alien.
Your
Immigrant
point,
alien.
your
about
point about
the-
him being spacey is I would follow that. I think that he may have actually left his brain on a different planet, because
Which one would it be? Like the 8th planet, the 9th planet, maybe?
Yeah, the Aquarius or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah, planet Aquarius.
Yeah,
That's on the other side of Uranus, huh?
I'm gonna go with the 7th planet.
Ah,
when the moon
hit your eyes. It's like a big pizza pie.
no, how does that song go?
So
Yeah,
I was
it's a
gonna go
more
more
though.
I was gonna go with more. His brain is still up Uranus, but
Right.
you know, that's
That's the 7th planet. I think the 7th rock from the sun. I think.
Yep. Well, yep.
That's like what, Jupiter?
And I still hold that
Saturn?
I still hold that Pluto is a planet, because that's the way I learned it when I was a kid.
And it was the 8th planet, right?
I'm not letting.
No,
I'm not
no,
letting
Pluto,
go.
Pluto was the ninth planet.
I'm not letting go. Neil deGrasse Tyson is a jerk.
Tyson.
Pluto was a comet
Oh, yeah.
stuck in our solar system.
Thanks, Jamie. You get this. You get all of my connections, huh?
Yeah. Oh, I was thinking about the Tyson Fury and the Wilder Fury trilogy fight, and so that was the first thing that popped in my head. Then I was like,
Oh
he's
no,
it's
mine
about
was literally Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yeah.
Is happy that Pluto was demoted. And he's
Yeah.
an advocate for Pluto demotion, and I hate being anti-Plutite people anyway.
Yeah, I mean, their arguments are good, but it's sentimental for me, you know.
Yeah, I always say, you've been sucking on too much polonium, dude.
Halos, polonium halos.
Yeah, I know. Which proves that the Earth is only 6,000 years old. Exactly.
Well, the granite is anyway.
Well,
No.
yeah, the polonium halos and the granite, but you presuppose it and it all works out anyway. So I don't know what you're talking about. Read Van Til.
Oh, I have. He's one of my heroes.
Okay, so
I knew it.
On a sidebar earlier today, I may end up reviewing one of these later on, but okay, Jay Dyer utterly obliterated Matt Dillahunty. I don't know if you guys saw that debate, but good gravy, just complete obliteration. And Dillahunty didn't even realize he was getting completely creamed.
And what was the format?
What do you mean format?
I mean, what was the question? You let him in a debate, right? You're talking debate.
The question was, please spell.
Let me pull the exact.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, please spell B.
You know what I'm talking about, right, Jamie?
I mean,
that
they were
that YouTube clip where they they do this spoof on a spelling bee and they put together two racial slangs, or a gay slang and a racial slang, and they put them together. Please spell.
Oh yeah. I've seen that.
Sorry, John. I've had way
was
too
it
much
first
coffee.
question?
What
Name.
are you talking about?
What's that?
Or was it first question? Name. Can't. What's my name again?
What's your name, little girl? What's your name? Leonard Skinner.
I wonder if that. I wonder if that was Joe Biden's theme song when he was the lifeguard at the pool.
Well,
What's your name, little girl? My leg hair's blonde.
Is that when he told Corn Pop to stop messing around? Is that what he did?
Well, no. That's why Corn Pop wanted to beat him up, because he kept asking the little girls, "What's your name?" Man, I say, have you guys seen the spoof video, like the music video that somebody did of the his whole speech about like blonde hair in the sun? Have you seen that?
Oh no, I haven't seen that one.
Oh my! Let me see if I can find it. Let me see if I can find it. It's freaking hilarious.
I've seen a few.
Hey, Andrew, what did you say your parents were again, as far as their religious affiliation? You said it earlier.
Christian, Presbyterian, but they've been Anglican. Like when we were in Sydney, we were evangelical Anglican. We moved Presbyterian, and then I shifted to become a Baptist.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
No, I find it interesting because I was born and raised Baptist, and so lucky for me, I was just born in the right denomination, like Jamie. It's like we're predestined. We were born in the right denomination.
Yeah,
and we know that our denomination is absolutely right, and we're not wavering, even though it's explained to us plainly.
Well, I go to the same churches. I go to the same church as Dan Patterson, who used to be employed by Ravi Zacharias.
Oh, okay. Yeah, how sad.
All right,
lucky man.
I'm gonna say something. I actually was an acquaintance of Ravi, and I would have had no idea. And the ones close to him that didn't have an idea, I feel so sorry for him.
Yeah,
we don't have to talk about that.
I feel sorry for Margie.
We can talk about it. I have no problem with that. But let's first listen to.
Oh yeah,
an epic song about hairy legs in the sun. I laughed so hard the first time I watched this.
And it is time for a president who understands Coldplay is the best band in the world.
That's wrong.
You got that wrong. No, look,
I got hairy legs. I'm best equipped to beat Donald Trump. That's what your poll said.
Vice President Biden, why are you a better choice?
Thank you.
So I'd like to talk about who we're running against. A billionaire who calls women horse-faced lesbians. You could release women from those agreements immediately.
Maybe they didn't like the joke I told.
Are you willing to release them?
Release them. These agreements were made consensually.
I'm the only person on this stage that's
got hairy legs. Seriously? Hairy legs that turn blonde in the sun.
We got other issues we're trying to get
Here's
to.
the last point I want. My time's going to run out. Here's the last point I want to make to you.
I got hairy legs. Yeah.
Booty gigs digging it.
We are a country where there are too many people that are obese. I am scared.
Vice President Biden, I want to start with you. Why should anyone have faith that you're the one who can get this done now?
Because I'm the only one that...
Stop. Let's talk about math. Let's talk about math. Okay, so here's the math. Coldplay is the best band.
Can I respond to the... Why am I stopping? No one else stops.
Okay.
Joe said it right. Here's the deal. Look, I think it's important that on day one, I have more hair than anyone else.
I got hairy legs.
I don't care.
Yeah, that's right. You heard what I said.
Time is up. Thank you.
I'm not out of time. You spoke over time, and I'm going to talk. Here's the deal.
I got hairy legs.
Song of 5 2020.
That was great.
All I gotta say is, what's really painful about that is they almost didn't go far enough in relation to what we're actually observing from the current supposed leader of the planet. I mean, good grave. I'd almost prefer him to like be able to dance and sing "I Got Hairy Legs" compared to what some of the stuff he's done on camera at like the UN and different speeches. It's like, oh man, this is embarrassing to watch.
Well, I did see a clip of Fred Astaire dancing at the 1970s Oscars, which I stumbled across on YouTube a couple of days ago. He's got more steps than Fred had then.
The sad thing is that guy is our president.
Oh yeah.
It's so he's the leader of supposedly the leader of the free world. I mean, it's just so bad. Yeah.
And the scary thing is, my folks are part of the Australians who think he's a better choice than Trump.
Oh man. Sidebar, folks. Doki Doki's been slinging super stickers, but his one with the dancer, it's giving me a serious chuckle right now. It's worth about to look at just thinking about the hairy leg song. Oh man. I still have not got. I remember the day that he made that, he actually, it's not the song obviously, but actually made the speech where he's standing out there like surrounded by little kids, and he starts talking about how little girls would run their hands up my legs and play with my leg hair because it was blonde in the sun. I'm just like, why would somebody running to be president of the United States talk about little kids rubbing your legs while you're a lifeguard? Like, that's weird, bro. Like, how do you not recognize that that's weird?
Sounds like a Roman Catholic priest.
Well, I mean, in fairness to Biden, he is Catholic, so maybe he was just expressing his. I mean, he's obviously undergoing dementia and probably some kind of like Alzheimer's or like memory issues. So maybe he was just having flashbacks to the time when he was, receiving his instructions, shall we say.
Kenny, did you see what I was? Were you seeing what I was seeing in that particular avatar in Smokey's room?
No, I've been using my my iPhone as of late, so I'm not privy to those visual stimulations that help your brain to continue to function. Mine's already done.
I'm on the way out. But,
you're running real close second to me.
Yeah.
Oh, hang on. Are you being ousted, Kenny?
Ousted from where?
Or like, are you becoming a heretic?
No, we're dying.
Oh no! I'm just obnoxious too. No, I'm just having a lot of fun. I'm just trying to play the troll to show a certain couple guys named Smokey and Standing that it's really silly to be calling each other names and doing that stuff. So I'm kind of like poking at both of them for fun.
Oh, okay. Well, that seems fair.
Did you guys?
When he calls him sifting for trash, I must apologize. I suggested that as a nickname.
I started the sifter thing, but it was sifting something else. I forget what it was, but I take claim to that. No,
I've said this multiple times, as you know, Kenny. Like, I think what's going on between the two of them is like ridiculous at this point. It needs to stop. There's zero big picture productivity from it, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it's not helping the Christian cause, really, is it?
No.
I thought Standing's thing where everybody came together and talked about it was pretty healthy. Did you guys catch that?
I was there.
Well, man, I'm not saying there's been attempts. I'm saying at this point, I think the two of them just need to drop it. Like, whether or not somebody's doing this better and the other person's doing this better and back and forth, it's neither here nor there for me at this point. They both need to stop it.
I'm going to default to a Christian comedian by the name of Mark Worry, who once asked a question of a crowd: are there any Catholics here? Are there any Presbyterians here? Are there any of these other denominations there? Well, somebody's going to be wrong.
And somebody's going to get offended.
Yep, that's pretty much the way it goes.
Which is why I don't know. I'm not going to get involved. I'm refusing to get involved in that whole deal on purpose because I think it's pointless. What's up, Second
I'm getting
John?
involved because I'm making fun of it. Obnoxiously making a point.
Well, that's fair. That's fair.
It's humor. I'm trying to win some brothers back to each other, and I try to do it through humor and sarcasm and hyperbole and all that good stuff.
Well, I would say that's not a unreasonable position to take for sure.
I'm Switzerland all the way.
I will say I was there at the last time when he was having a go at David McQueen for not being disordered or not being orderly and getting his terms mixed up, which was a brutal fight, really, and a brutal picture. So
I didn't see that one.
Shut up, Andrew. You're really getting on my nerves.
Okay, so Joe Biden is with us, and then Second John's also joined us. What's going on, guys?
Not much, bro. Hanging out, enjoying the show, bro. Talking about Joe Biden and aliens. I was like, oh man, this sounds interesting. and Venus. But yeah,
well, I mean, I would say that Joe Biden having a brain is every bit as plausible as aliens having seeded the planet with life 4 billion years ago. What do you guys think?
I saw that movie
years ago. Yeah, man.
Bob, when are you gonna get saved? Bob, when are you gonna get saved?
Who's that?
Oh, you need to get saved, Bob.
It's Jamie Russell. Oh, Jamie
Oh, that's
Russell.
a good one coming from Jamie, who thinks Ellen G. White was a prophet.
I love you, Bob. I just wanted to beat you to it because you always say that every time.
Well, I do say that to you, Jamie, because I'm not saying it out of nastiness. But, you know, when you come out with that stuff, what precisely am I supposed to think? Really? Kenny, are you going to talk to me or are you just ignoring me?
I'm probably going to ignore you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Are you
I
guys
like
having...
Bob. I think Bob's cool, man. You know, I never had a problem with him. Personally, doing Tiger Television, by the way, Bob. I'm just disguised into me.
And Jamie, you need to get yourself King James Bible.
I have one. It's right here, actually. No, I was just having fun, Bob.
And make sure it's the 1611 and
Oxford
not the 7 other revisions.
Can it be the Oxford? Is that okay?
Oh, you've been learning from Rob Rowe, have you?
No, actually, I just can read.
No, I just read the front.
Read the preface of your King James Bible, man.
I can't read then. Right.
No, you can.
Yeah, because it's right there in the preface of the King James Bible, which revision it is.
It says on the second page, I think. And I just want to point out that Iger here, I went with peace offerings and friendly banter, and he wouldn't let me in his room.
Bro, I didn't see you back there because I think when you came in, this guy, you guys know him. His name's Wesley, but he came in, bro. He started talking like right towards the end, and man, it was he made my, you know, I don't believe in the earth spinning and all, but dang, man, I felt like I was spinning at that point. He started talking there at the end, and then I decided to end the stream. But honestly, I would have loved to talk to you about the topic, bro. It's kind of interesting topic. I only started looking into it a little bit long ago. It was about you know, like the giant trees being Devil's Tower, and there's a lot of like Machu Picchu. There's like a face on the mountain, so it's like a lot of these.
I saw that movie too. That is awesome movie.
Yeah, there's a lot of these big. Oh, here, I guess I can show a video. Actually, there's a lot of like these mountains looking structures that.
Who was in that movie? Was that Tom Cruise?
No, none of the satanic Illuminati puppets on this one, bro. It's just pictures of like
Alec Baldwin.
Yeah. It's just it was just random pictures of
have you seen The Shadow?
What's that, Jamie?
Have you guys seen The Shadow with Alec Baldwin? I mean, that is definitely Satan.
Jamie, I'm not talking to you either, because for me to talk to you would be like Einstein condescending and talking to Smokey.
You might lose your.
Actually, I would say it's more like Spinoza. Okay, get it right.
Oh, that's right. He was a
I do have
Christian,
a question.
Spinoza.
Like when you have more than, let's say, 5 people in the chat, is there like a second window to see people backstage, or is it all right there, right in front of you?
It's a passenger side window.
You asking me, Iger?
Yeah, like when you have, let's say, 5 people and more people are coming in on the StreamYard window, like can you see more than, because maybe I just couldn't see him. I don't know, because Jamie Russell did try to come into my stream, but I didn't see him.
Once you get a bunch, like if you have any shared screens and stuff, then it can like push things down below the initial frame of reference. So you might not, or it can just be like slightly covered up depending on your screen size. And you might, if you're looking, you theoretically, like technically, could they be visible? Yes, but are you actually going to notice it? Not necessarily.
I
It
don't
makes
know
a
Jamie
difference if
Russell
you're
'cause
facing the bow or the stern, though.
I would have loved to talk to you about this. How long were you there? Were you there towards the end, or like were you there like for a long time? Because I let Wesley in right after he talked, bro. I said,
Yeah, I was back
Wesley's
there.
famous because he
I was
really
back
made my
there,
head spin.
and then that other guy came in, and then you let him in. But
Yeah,
I
you're
mean,
back
weird,
there
I didn't
aft
see
port
you.
right there, Jamie, aren't you?
What?
You're back there aft port
Yeah, yep.
and on the flying bridge.
I think it's the stern, left flank.
Okay, yeah.
Shoot,
Right.
you want to do a stream on this together, bro? I'm down.
No,
Yeah,
that's in the
yeah.
ocean.
I got to
No,
share.
the ocean. It's the ocean, not a
Well,
stream.
what do you call a man with no arms and legs floating next to a self-powered boat?
Not sure.
Bob Rowe. Robert Rowe. Bob Rowe. He fell out of his boat. No arms and legs. He's bobbing next to a rowboat.
You don't have to explain it to me. Got it. Because I know the genius of your comedic timing and trolling of Smokey. I know what you're doing because sometimes you giggle. Jamie plays a dumb blonde sometimes on the Smokey Saint channel. And it drives Smokey crazy.
So are you a Molinist, Kenny?
No, I'm not a Molinist.
Oh.
No.
Hey, so in sidebar, since when have Baptists been considered antinomian?
When they became Molinist. I'm joking.
No, I mean, the question I'm asking is like, I mean, I know you're joking, but like,
yeah,
I don't remember when I was learning about the Baptist doctrine. I don't recall that being a remotely part of it, or really pretty much anybody that's like, I think I had a whole rampage against on Praise one time on like the differentiation between, or well, his lack of differentiation between like hyper grace and free grace.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm like, if you take 2 seconds to research it, there is a dramatic difference between hyper grace and free grace. And I could argue, I would say that hyper grace could easily be construed as antinomian.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. But historically, because the Baptists were always connected through what has been called the trail of blood, and it is interesting, but the Anabaptists were actually all of the heretic groups all through church history. That doesn't mean they weren't saved, but that is the actual truth of church history. And so because of their denial of the need for sanctifying grace in one's life, to continue to grow in grace and knowledge of Jesus Christ. That's why they would be tagged as antinomians. So it is a pretty historic, but once the Protestant Reformation came about, Baptist bodies splintered tremendously, but the history is still the Anabaptists, which go back through the Donatists and everything else. Almost from day one, a Baptist kind of structure can be found with John the Baptist being the Pope, the first Pope. Now the last part's not true, but the former is true, that these rebaptizers have been there all throughout church history.
Right.
Because the rebaptizers are those that will rebaptize or believers' baptism. So.
Ken, can I just ask you if hyper grace sort of undermines, as it were, by default, the need for or the necessity of the commandments? Is that why it's referred to as antinomian, or?
Yeah, that would be very close to the thinking, but there's various arguments. The idea is just basically the argument that there is no necessity for right living that follows saving faith. That would be antinomianism. Yeah.
No necessity.
In its truest sense.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
To me, the premise of antinomianism, whether you're under the or the justification is hyper grace or otherwise, to me, it's like, so you're basically arguing. This is why I find it so incoherent. I'm like, so you're basically arguing that God's morality no longer applies.
Right. It's like those retards, the preacher. That's hyper grace.
Exactly. Well, and that's why I say in the context of the free grace versus hyper grace discussions, I'm like, I know speaking for myself, I in no way, shape, form, or fashion substantiate nor support, and in fact I outright reject, and it's on tape, if you will, of my rejection of the preacher's positions, rather strongly rejected by myself. And it's like, this stuff is, I mean, I would argue it's more heretical than a lot of other things that are discussed. I mean, if it's not on the edge of just full scale, like, I don't even know if I can. I mean, the whole saved as by fire, I don't even know if that I can go that far with you. You know, if you're actually operating from that perspective, I don't know.
Right. It's traced back to the whole idea of the legalists, and then the opposite would be those that teach a lasciviousness, you know, a license to sin. That grace is a license to sin. Now, I have never met somebody that believes that until I came on YouTube as of last year, more consistently.
Is hyper grace some sort of contingency upon God? You know, once saved, always saved, and like, it's almost as though they think God's got no choice about concerning salvation and all.
I think it's a warping. It's certainly a warping of the nature of the gospel itself when you say that the actual believing that once you're saved, you're always saved, and it's eternal, and you can never lose it, and that is the gospel message. That is as damnable as any heresy out there.
It's downright dangerous.
Absolutely.
I think the point that this one of the spin points that is horrific is the aspect that once saved, they can no longer sin.
That's the crazy one.
That's the ditch. That's the fall off ditch.
That's the defining point right there to me, where you're just like, you've completely lost your mind at that point. Like, you can no longer sin as you're dog cussing me. You can no longer sin. Like what?
Yeah, I heard that.
And the part that takes it to an even greater extreme is if somebody else will admit that they are a sinner, then that by default means that you're not saved. Like, what? Like,
right.
Hang on. Is the core of the gospel not my recognition that I am a sinner? Like, isn't that a necessity for me to recognize this? So you're now saying if I recognize myself as a sinner, then I am not saved, when I must recognize my sin and my need for a savior in order to be saved. Like,
once you recognize that it's sin and Jesus paid for it, it no longer becomes sin, and then you can do it anyway. Yeah. You just got to acknowledge it. It's no longer sin. Positive affirmation.
I've never been able to truly, like, I hear what they say, but I'm like, I don't know how you can rationally come to that conclusion if you have read the scriptures. And it's like, so yes, from an eternal perspective, God is forgiving your sins, but it clearly states that you can fall away.
I definitely see how they read it. It's just really it's like the most unfortunate and dishonest. I don't even know if it's dishonest necessarily per se. It's just like an extreme form of not recognizing. For me, it's just like, it seems people like forget the whole reason we're in the mess we're in the first place. It seems to me, maybe I have something wrong here, but it seems like when you make it like that, or even some of the free grace stuff, it's like it totally disregards, like, why are we still, it's like, if that's all true, then why is there still sin? Why aren't we glorified now? Why isn't it fixed now if God, that's all God's waiting for? I don't know. I mean, you can make reasons for that, I guess, but
there's a motive involved in the reading of scripture, because you're looking at the words and you're trying to make them fit your preconceived notions. I'll give you an example. Word of faith. Kenneth Copeland.
I should be-
Hebrews 1, or Hebrews 11 and following, by faith, we understand that God made the universe. God has faith because it was by God's faith that he created the universe. And if you have God's kind of faith, you can create your own reality. Okay, now here's another one. With the divorce and remarriage thing, if the unbeliever leaves, the believer is no longer held accountable to stay. They're free to marry someone else. But, you interpret this idea that it's not unbelief against God, it's actually unbelief against the marriage vows that you took. And then so you go looking for wife number 4 because the Bible says the pastor has to be the husband of one wife. He has to be married. That's another one.
That is just weird.
Is that the position that Hovind takes?
Yes.
So
that is willful manipulation of the biblical text.
Eisegesis, Ken, is it?
Yes, and stupid Jesus too.
Yeah, it's definitely not excess Jesus, that's for sure.
Stupid Jesus at its best.
Yeah, I agree that people. I don't in any way, shape, form, or fashion claim to have 100% correct interpretation by any stretch of the imagination.
I do. Just ask me.
No, it's right here.
But some of the stuff, but some of these things, I'm like,
I think we almost killed Bob with that one.
But some of the stuff that have so much controversy over it, I'm just like, I don't understand why this is difficult. Like, some of the stuff is difficult. What the heck is the noise in the background? What is going on?
Sorry, I was getting my motorcycle out.
Well, that would
I
explain
think it's
it.
Iger or John or Bob there.
What?
No, my uncles are bikers, but my mom and my wife never let me ride, but I've always wanted a Harley.
I'll take one. John, I just wanted to say that's probably because you're a duplicitous, disgusting heretic and
subhuman piece of crap, right?
Yeah, you're cockroach.
That's the quote. Oh.
Even
cucaracha.
Cockroach shall inherit the earth. If there's a nuclear holocaust, I hear.
Shut up, Jamie.
Shut up.
I saw this video, man, about nuclear weapons being fake, and I thought it was pretty fascinating. It was like 10 minutes long, but this guy was going over like the footage of the nuclear bombs and how, man, it's hard to explain, but he, like, in some of the shots, like the bus and the buildings get blown to pieces and the camera's like right there. And he's like, what type of camera can withstand the nuclear blast while the building is getting decimated? It was pretty fast.
Are you saying that you don't believe in nuclear? I would think that not believing in nuclear weapons would be actually necessary for some of the other beliefs you have, if I'm honest.
It's irrelevant, but I just thought it was fascinating. It doesn't
let me help you out with the kind of camera. It's called the camera with a zoom lens.
Yeah, the P90 or whatever they are.
Let me see if I have that. Let me see if I can find that real quick. And
it brings ships back from the flat Earth.
Yeah, it
takes the curvature out of the Earth.
Like you literally zoom in behind the curve.
Wouldn't the radiation erase the film anyway?
No, they have a special camera that it's really cool. Like they like have like this wheel with mirrors on it that like catches reflection. I forget exactly how it works, but it's so they can get they invented cameras when they were testing nuclear weapons, and they came up with all these better and better ways, and I think that's what developed a lot of the high-speed camera technology, if I recall.
Yeah, they have like a double coating of super glue around them.
Yeah.
And then a layer of duct tape.
Hold on. I got
No, they do this cool thing where when they first started inventing the high, what do you call it? The frame rate or whatever, so they could get like really detailed video of it. Like the cameras
we have the frame rate down to at the literal speed of light.
Yeah, femtoseconds, I think. They call them. Or is it even better now?
What did you say? What?
Femtoseconds, I think.
Femto?
Femto.
No, I've never taken that drug.
you can get a generic pretty easy, but
Alex,
you need
John,
a prescription
without a
Can I share my
prescription.
screen for like?
without a prescription.
Hey, can I show this video?
guy
Generic
named
and
Gary
without
actually a liberal.
Maybe
3
Dr.
minutes.
Alex can write me
It's
one.
gonna be
No, I don't write prescriptions. That would be my dad that could write that.
How long
Pinto,
is it?
it's
How
a
long
foot
is it,
fetish
Iger?
for the
It's
liberals.
10 minutes, but I'm just gonna let it play for like 3 minutes because it's you get the point after like 3 minutes. He goes over a couple of the clips of nuclear blast, and then it's pretty interesting. But my bad, I still need to find.
Hey, you know what? I ate some of the sugar-free. It's like sugar zero or something that has stevia or something like that in it. And I had a nuclear blast in the middle of the night in my bathroom after eating that stuff.
Yeah, stevia is the CBD stuff.
What is it? Stevia or stevia?
Stevia.
Yeah, that
stevia.
stuff gives you a nuclear explosion.
It's
Eat the whole package.
Yeah, it's not good for you. None of the sugar substitutes are good for you.
None of them.
As a type 1 diabetic, I refrain. I use a little bit of sucralose, and that's about it.
Say that one more time. What?
I refrain from all like phenolphthalein. That's an instant killer. The guy that invented Equal, which is the Phelonutrix, he's
Another
still in
thing
jail.
that have taken as a given that seems to be that could possibly be a complete fabrication. It might be another offshoot of this man's plan to just siphon off a bunch of money from the space program, but also siphon a bunch of money from the nuclear weapons program, because it seems like, and this was only brought to my attention through you and your post about it and the footage that you've shown, it seems like at least the test footage that we've seen of a lot of nuclear weapons from back in the day when they're telling our parents to duck and cover under their school desk to protect them from a nuclear blast, and you got the air raid sirens going off. Obviously, our entire culture was completely paralyzed by the idea of nuclear weapons. But when you're looking at the test footage, given back then, it might not have looked fake. You know, back then they actually thought King Kong looked real in the movie, or Jaws looked real in the movie. But now we can see it's clearly fake. When you look back at that footage, it's oftentimes it looks like the scale of, say, a subdivision where you're in an empty lot across the street, aiming a camera at a farmhouse on the other side of the street, a lot over. And then the blast hits and the farmhouse just gets destroyed. The house just gets ripped apart. But what happened to the camera? You know, who's filming that? The camera is only a couple 100 feet away from that. And then
it is clear that they got Batman or somebody to film that.
Clearly. I mean, that's clearly a model with
well, the thing is they want to take over our lives and turn us all into liberals.
I could just
and
mute
feed us
it and then you
sugar
guys can talk over
until
it.
we're all fat and we can't fight them, and then they spend all our money.
They took
on
my testicle,
foreign
man.
interests.
They took my
and we live on a flat Earth under a globe.
I prefer the concave model.
Well, the flat Earth is what you experience every day, but I
know.
don't think we want to talk about that today.
Amen.
If you just deflated those globe eyeballs, you would see it the truth.
No, you've drank too many highballs.
Yeah, that's the only time I feel the Earth spinning when whenever I used to get super drunk, and with that guy
I think you still are.
The other day, I was like, dang. But yeah, it's pretty interesting. And then he shows a clip of how when they were doing testing later down.
Hey guys, I'm getting too obnoxious because I'm too tired. I'm gonna step out, but I'll listen.
Good to see you, Kenny. Have a good one.
I hate you, you heretic.
He laughed.
Just kidding.
He laughed, but yeah.
Wrote you. Look at this. I mean, that's clearly a bottle rocket with a little bit of jazz thrown in.
Happy 4th of July.
It's Halloween weekend. Freaking
So
devils.
do you not
holiday.
believe? What, you don't think rockets exist or nuclear weapons either?
Man, I don't know. Like I said, if you want to watch this video, bro, like here's where he's showing here's where he's showing dynamite being stacked.
So I got a question for you. So do you think if they knew there was going to be a massive shockwave and radiation, do you think that it's possible they could have built a bunker that was like heavily shielded with lead and then had a window that the camera was being able to shoot through?
That's what they did. They invented cameras.
It's possible, bro. But it's also possible that they could have faked the whole thing. That's all.
Hey, do you ever consider like looking for videos to disprove your when because it seems like I've said this before, I think, but like it seems like you guys will find one thing that sounds kind of fishy and then decide everything's fake but then not really challenge that like because like you can look up documentaries that tell you about how they, like what I was talking about, like they literally invented cameras for videotaping nuclear explosions, and so it's very fascinating, and the ways they got better and better as they were in tandem with the testing, and it's fascinating the things they came up with, and you can watch documentaries on it, and it's just like once it's laid out, the truth is laid out about like the details, it's kind of like then you realize, okay, what am I misunderstanding about this thing that sounded kind of funny or fishy, you know? That's just my way I see it. That's just my opinion.
Like I said, I thought this was interesting because
so I agree.
Like
so I agree. Do you think?
Earlier,
So I agree. Do you think that all of the people who died in the cities that were like wiped out, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, like, do you think that didn't actually happen?
No. I like whether nuclear weapons are real or not. Those people did die. Just same thing with 9/11. Whatever you think the reasoning behind it is, those buildings went down. They killed a lot of people. But it's the same concept.
Whether or not it was planes or planes or traditional explosives taking down the World Trade Center is way different than an entire city being wiped off the map. Like, and what would be necessary to pull that off?
But
not like to mention, my best friend is cleaning up Hanford right now. He cleans up Hanford like he's a mechanical engineer, where they develop nuclear weapons.
Imagine this is your job. Oh, we just blew up a nuclear bomb. Now you got to go down there and film the destruction. Like, you know what I'm saying? Whose job is that? Like, doesn't radiation from a nuclear blast last like
my friend at the time? Do you think they knew? At the time, do you think they really knew like the extent of the radiation poisoning and stuff when they're like just now? Like, who was I'm trying to blank on her name. Who was the lady that she was very active researcher who ended up killing herself basically from all the radiation poisoning?
Because that's the first person to discover it. Mary Riley or something.
This guy's name is Gaylor Windsor. He goes around freaking eating uranium or whatever in like the late 90s or something like that to tell people
it's not dangerous.
Right. It's crazy.
He eats like uranium cake and stuff, and it's like, well, how did he die? Well, he had pancreatic cancer and
well, he's really interesting story guy because he actually built most of the original nuclear power plants, and then he kind of like rebelled against them or whatever. So his story is interesting. His name is Gaylor Windsor, and it's he's like a Kent Hobbin of nuclear weapons, where he used to go around doing seminars or whatnot. But yeah, it's just interesting. When you look at how nuclear power plants work, it's kind of like a steam engine, and really that's what it is. It's a very, very intricately well-designed steam engine. And he says it's just the most expensive way to boil uranium. And the government was coming to his house and trying to take his uranium away.
Yeah, nuclear power.
I should let this guy talk, bro. Like, trivia, I should let this guy talk.
I watched some interesting. It
was just interesting
interviews with some different researchers that were very pissed off at the 8 Mile Island action, but then the movies that came out of that. Because I remember listening to these physicists, and they were explaining like why the way like nuclear plant meltdowns are portrayed in movies is like not possible from a physics perspective in terms of like the explosions and such. Yes, you could have potential like meltdown and stuff, but what would actually happen in terms of what's their danger radius and all that kind of stuff is nothing like what's portrayed in the movies, which
Well, do you remember what they said about
freaked everybody out in the 70s, in the late 70s, and basically shut down nuclear power production.
Fukushima was awful and it did a whole bunch of damage, it seems to me, but people were freaking out like it was going to kill the oceans, and it was like coming over across, stuff was washing up, people's feet were washing up in Seattle and stuff. It's terrible.
And it's the same thing with like the BP oil spill in the Gulf.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
oh my
Yeah.
God, it was so bad. It's like, if you actually looked, I remember seeing an analysis of it, and it was the equivalent of one drop of ink in a Olympic-sized swimming pool. And
yeah. And like, I mean, turns out
there was nasty little portions of the beach and all that kind of stuff, but it was like nothing like what what they showed you on TV was like the very small spots where there was like wash up.
Yeah. And it disappears, and it'll disappear, and they don't know where it went. And like, turns out they find like there's actually bacteria in the ocean that like actually break it down, and then they find it naturally seeping into the ocean, like from underground, deposits already. Anyways, like it's just like a drop in the bucket, I guess. I mean, you don't want to. That doesn't mean it's fine to spill oil everywhere, but I mean, obviously, it's not like they make it sound like it's the end of the world kind of thing. And
yeah, it's not like it's saying that it's not nasty and you don't want to prevent it from happening, but it's not the end of the world like it's portrayed in the movies.
Yeah.
And
Look at this picture, Jamie Russell. Like, you're gonna tell me they built a bunker right next to the house and then blew it up? I'm gonna rewind that one. That one was pretty good. Like.
Well, see if maybe I'll see if I can find the thing that talks about the cameras. It's really, I watched it a long time ago. It's very good. It was very detailed.
Like, the camera's right there. I mean, geez, and it's blowing up buildings to pieces and.
Well,
like,
sure,
what
but
camera is this, bro? What, this is not the Nikon P1000. That's like the best camera available.
No,
for flat Earth. This thing's like freaking indestructible, bro. It's like a cockroach designed this freaking camera.
Well, no, dude, they put them in bunkers that were shielded and halfway under the ground, and then they ran wires, or they ran, I don't think it was wires, but they had some way of transferring it to another location, and like the cameras would get destroyed, at least at first, if I recall correctly. And so I'm sure there was obviously a zoom lens going on, but they were obviously like protected bunkers. And what, Jungle, you don't believe in fission? I mean, the first ones were fission, if I recall, and then the hydrogen bomb was the first fusion type weapon, which is more energy efficient or whatever, the mass. But I mean, I don't know. It's like, what are they trying to fake with that? It's like they're spending $10 billion on ITER or whatever. It's to do fusion.
The original thought was it was to siphon more money from the taxpayers. Like you think NASA gets $20 billion is nothing compared to what the military industrial complex budget every year. So that's what the guy was saying.
What do you think they're using it for?
What do I think they use it for? That's a good question. My best deduction is that they've been working for this one world government for a long time. So they used this whole Cold War to basically go after Asia in the 70s, Latin America in the 80s. And then now we're in Iraq with the same Russia versus America kind of thing. But it's too late now because they already did it. So now we already have central banks all over the world. That was the whole point of the Civil Wars, just to destabilize the countries. And then they can, the Rothschilds, if you want to get technical, that way they can control the economies of that country. And now, no matter where you go in the world, you can take your Visa, MasterCard, American Express, and you could just go ahead and swipe it, even in Iraq. And that's why they did it, because they wanted to establish a one world currency. That sum it up pretty good.
I wouldn't disagree with every point you made. There's definitely some substance.
Yeah, that's the end. That's the end goal. One world government, one world currency, one world religion. So we can have the Antichrist. But they can have the Antichrist, because I don't want to see him. But dang, it seems like he's right around the corner. Is it going to be Bill Gates, or is it Trump, or is it Fauci? Who knows, bro? It might be Elon Musk. LPP left.
He left. I thought it was his channel.
he must have lost his internet or
He'll
something.
be back.
Let him off.
So I mean, do you think the high-speed cameras we have now are real?
Yeah, bro.
Like the nuclear. I mean, because it's like there's like a history to like the development of these weapons, and the cameras, and so like you can like trace the history back and like see it. So there's no reason to think
There's
it's
a lot
fake.
of fabricated science, and you got to
Like
take
what?
that into account.
You think that's fake?
So basically,
how the heck do they do that? Get this footage.
I could play the video if you want. I'll let him explain it.
Yeah. So it's just another way to get us scared into giving them more money. So we're giving them hundreds of billions of dollars in this space race that America and Russia were doing, and they also did the Cold War. So they scared us into this nuclear scare, and then stole a bunch more money to build fake nuclear weapons. And so yeah, the nuclear weapons don't exist as such. The tests that you've seen, the very early ones, like you were talking about, are clearly fake, just done on models. Some of the later tests were done using stacked dynamite. You just get a shitload of dynamite and blow it all up, and it makes the mushroom cloud, does the whole thing. And what they do is they tell one team that, they'd have a bunch of people 20 miles away, say army guys watching, doing the test. And then you've got over on one island, these people stacking dynamite, saying that we're doing this for comparative purposes, and the real nuke's going to be over on that island. Meanwhile, they got another team over on that island stacking dynamite for comparative purposes, and the real nuke's going to be on the other island. So they even have military men stacking dynamite that they know is being used for these supposed nuclear explosions, but they believe that they've seen a real nuke, even though they tell them to cover your
So
eyes,
you don't
put your
think
head
that
in
there
your
would
lap,
be
and you
a?
don't see anything
It would
until
make sense for them to
all the smoke clears
misdirect
afterwards.
on where
But,
exactly
yeah, a
the
lot of
weapon would
military
be.
men will.
I mean, they do misdirection on that kind of stuff all the time.
Well, in the video, the guy says they basically firebomb. They do have big bombs, but so basically firebomb the cities or whatnot.
Are you coming back in, Kenny?
Yeah, LPP's back.
Kenny's gone.
No, he's in the chat.
Where,
Yeah, Kenny's in the chat. He's been talking trash about Jamie the whole time.
Not that it matters anyways, because
what's that, Bob?
They're gonna get us with radio frequencies and vaccines. Huh?
I know it's CGI. CGI is fake, though. I say the CGI is fake. So these are very intricate models using micro atoms to get the detail right and the scale
So
right.
right here. No, like I said, there are some big bombs, but it's just not what we've been told again. But I don't know, bro. Anyways, this is not my I thought it was interesting. I thought it was an interesting video. And it's like 15 minutes long if anybody's interested. But yeah, they do have
I'm bored seeing that video. That's
He's
from
cutting out.
Power.
Can you hear me?
Unfortunately, yes.
But
is he tripping
I can
out?
feel the love in the room.
No, your mic's going. I couldn't hear you. I find the flat Earth to be a conspiracy in that it's really it's really concave, and they're just spending all our money to lie to you about that. What do you say to that?
Yeah, you're right about that, bro.
I mean, it was all too easy that Iger and some XORO guy like figured out to trick you out right. Like they're gonna let you guys know the truth. The truth is flat Earth is fake and it's really concave. And the reason it looks flat is because your eyes are round and it creates an optical illusion.
You don't think it's more plausible that they lied to you because they control Hollywood, so they They control all the media through 6 corporations.
Oh, dude, it's multi-layered. Like, you think you got the truth? I mean,
no, nobody.
I know the sheeple don't have
the
the truth.
Bible.
I know the
What
sheeple
Bible
don't.
do you guys use, Jamie Russell?
What?
What Bible do Seventh-day Adventists use?
They use all of them.
All of them. But I mean,
but especially the good ones. We don't need the Bible. We have Ellen White.
No, but I like that because when I used to debate atheists a lot, it's funny how we used to debate atheists when it seems like Christians debating each other all the time. But when I used to debate atheists all the time, I don't care if you give me the Japanese King James version. It doesn't matter. It's the same narrative. It's the same story. You can argue about.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, a particular word meaning whatever, but you're gonna get the big picture from reading any Bible. It doesn't matter what Bible you read. So and I got a lot of likes for Seventh-day Adventists because when I was a Catholic, I had a friend that lived down the street, and he used to tell me how the Pope was the Antichrist, and I used to tell him he was crazy. And now guess what? I think the bro. So I do.
You agree now?
Respect for Seventh-day Adventists. And then the whole Saturday, that's kind of like their focal point. You know, that Saturday is the Sabbath. They were right about that too. So I shout out to my friend from 20 years ago that used to tell me the Pope was the Antichrist, and that was the Seventh-day Adventist because he was right about that. I don't follow any of the Ellen White or any of that, but and then one thing that does bother me is that they say Sunday worship is going to be the mark of the beast, but I don't believe that. I think it's going to be some type of cryptocurrency injects with for the mark of the beast. I don't think it's going to be Sunday worship. If people went out to worship Jesus Christ on Sunday, that would be great. But I'm just saying, if they worship Jesus Christ, bro, I mean, it's not a little fascist, but now people worship the Big Bang and the.
Is Iger roboting for me or
whatever?
everybody?
Whatever hip hops are, they like Nicki Minaj or
Hey Iger,
let's say or
Iger,
whatever. Let me hook up to my phone.
Yeah, stop.
Yeah,
just stop sharing the video. That's what's blocking your. That's what's jacking your upload speed.
Hey, just to mention into all this stuff. So, at the end of World War II, so Mitsubishi made the engines for the Zeros. Subaru was the tank manufacturers. You had Suzuki that was basically small engine motorbike type stuff for the Japanese. Then you had Yamaha, which was for most of your generators, things like that. You had what was the other group? Isuzu,
Honda.
Yeah, Honda and Toyota were the actual assembly lines.
The motors.
No, not the motors.
Just the assembly line.
Just the assembly lines. And then they incorporated the motors from Mitsubishi and all those. And then when you had so it took them to repurpose and have the vehicles come in. Because I remember when that first Honda came over, looked like a little toy. It must have been like 75, something like that.
Yeah, they're the first CCs or whatever. They were
right.
Flip them over. One guy can just about flip one over.
And the thing about that was, then all of a sudden we had the gas crisis. Okay, so 75, 76, 77, boom, gas crisis. Okay, so it was right after Ford left, and then you had Jimmy Carter. My dad and I were on the Long Beach Pier, and there was, just like there is today with this embargo at the Long Beach, Los Angeles harbors, you have just tanker after tanker after tanker as far as you could see with any binocular. So, you have those 25-cent things on the pier. It's 10 cents at the time. Put it in there for as far as that thing could see, right? You just saw tankers during that oil embargo. And then all of a sudden, everybody's buying these four cylinders, which Ford merged with Mazda. And then you had Chevy merged with Isuzu, which their problems with their 4 cylinders were they blew head gaskets all the time. And Honda and Toyota came in on their own. Toyota was kind of fledgling until they got the Camry, which wasn't until the late 80s. And then, so if you look at the progression of bringing after all this, I'm very skeptical as to how all this worked. But when you go back and you find out that actually Douglas MacArthur was the emperor of Japan until he was basically relieved of duty for crossing the 38th parallel by Harry Truman. You have to understand that that Taoism type of religion and all that they have in Japan, they had to have an emperor, something to look up to. So Douglas MacArthur was made the emperor when they got rid of Hiroshito. And has anybody here ever been to Japan, Tokyo?
No,
anywhere like that? Have you?
I watched a lot of movies about.
No. If you go there, so I was there, and last time I was there was 1999. First time I was there was 92, and it was the weirdest freaking place I've ever been in my life. It was just so. What's the word? God, I'm missing it. It's it's just like somebody just washed all the walls, and it was clean. It was, it was like very, what's the word? I want to say antiseptic, but that's not the word. Anyway, so you could actually, in 95, I was there, and I could buy a full cotton shirt out of a vending machine. And I had that shirt up until about 2 years ago. One of the best shirts I ever had. So that whole, and the people there is if you're walking the opposite direction, they peel around you like ants. They're just so humble. I don't know if it's like that now because it's been a while, but that was just the weirdest, eerie feeling being in a place. It was more like a big brainwashed area. And so it kind of encapsulates what you're talking about. The video, a lot of things, are not real, and how did all these engines come from Japan, and, all of this other stuff that we have. So the marriage between Chevy and Isuzu still exists, but Isuzu is no longer, they no longer are a player in the game at all. So they revamped their engines because Chevy had to replace a lot of the models because, like the Isuzu Trooper was the GMC Jimmy or something like that. And they both blew head gaskets because they had the same engine in them. So the problem with Isuzu was very noticeable, whereas Mazda and your crossover with Mitsubishi with Chrysler at the time, now Mitsubishi's really no longer a seller, but they're still merged with Chrysler. All the engines from Chrysler are Mitsubishi engines, except for the Chargers and the Challengers and all those, because they don't have a V8. Anything that's a 4-cylinder or a 6-cylinder is Mitsubishi. So the interesting thing about this is that you have from Japan, from us blowing them out of the water, and then we reestablished them, and then we basically took over. So who actually owns Toyota? Who actually owns those? That's the question. Exactly right.
BlackRock and Vanguard.
And it's just
who said that? Who said BlackRock and Vanguard?
LPP, I think, said that.
Yeah, I did.
And LPP knows it's all owned by corporations now. They've been creating this big monopoly that nobody can see.
Right. It's just, and everybody just goes and buys their bacon and eggs at the store, and says, "Oh, let's have Saturday breakfast together." Nobody does that anymore. Everybody's all, it's just a totally different world, and people just follow along with it because that's what they're told to do. They're just told, and a lot of this stuff you can't research on Google. You have to have the actual book. You have to go to a library, microfiche that thing, and then find it on the shelf. A lot of the stuff that you get from Wikipedia is just a bunch of malarkey. You got to fish through it.
Well, a lot of the stuff.
Yeah, it's horrible. I digress.
A lot of the stuff that I agree with you. There's a lot of manipulation. The biggest thing actually that Google's doing is not necessarily this; they're removing the access to it. they are just pushing it down 2 or 3 pages.
Yeah, burying it.
Because I mean, they know that 90% of people do not make it past page 1, and there's massive data on this. And let's get real: Google has more information than any other company on the planet that has ever existed. So they know full well how far you got to hide something. Therefore, you can't be accused of deleting the data, even though I think they're doing that to an extent as well now. In the last 5 years they have been. Before it was just manipulation. Now it's like they are erasing some stuff. But at the same time, we put it down 50 pages, it's still there. And the fact they've been forced to admit that there was manual manipulation of search results has been going on even after claiming, over and over again under oath that there was no manipulation, and then finally getting busted and oh yeah, there was, but then there was no punishment. I mean, it's like, come on, man. Politicians all know that Google can bury them and they won't get reelected. So
yeah, they've got all the Gmails, bro.
I'll go ahead and to venture to say that these politicians that they're all part of. They have stock in BlackRock and Vanguard. It's part of when they give their welcoming committee into the club. They're like, you get some stock in BlackRock and Vanguard or whatever other leading stocks they had back in those days.
BlackRock lends money to central banks, so
they pretty much own everything, bro.
Yeah, I mean, well, in BlackRock, Vanguard, Berkshire Hathaway, and what's the other one? State Street Capital. Yep. I mean, they own equity positions in each other's holding companies. It's like there's no telling. It's like when you actually look at the shareholders of Coke and Pepsi as an example. The majors, yeah, but I'm saying on both sides. So when you actually think about it, are Coke and Pepsi actually competing against each other if the majority of the stock is owned by the same groups?
Not at all.
Oh, wait, not really. They're just appealing to different demographics. That's it.
They keep us divided, fighting each other, and then they get more and more control. They're taking over your land, your water, your streams, and there's the I think it was the CEO of I forgot. It was one of the water companies, but he said human beings should not be allowed to have access to water for free. So they want to monopolize everything, not just the banks. Or it used to be the banks, because if you control the money, then you can control whatever you want. You could buy the oil. You could, we thought we went to Iraq for oil, but it wasn't just the oil. They wanted to. It was like a gateway drug into the Middle East with the whole Afghanistan.
Yeah, opium.
Whatever. So
the opium.
Well, I'm saying they want to control the banks, because if they control the banks, then they can print whatever money they want to control the resources, and it's all about control. It's all about power, and that's how these people play. And they don't care about you. They don't care about your kids. They have no feelings. I don't know what's wrong with these people. Honestly, they sold their soul to the devil. It really does come down to the Bible. Just about every conspiracy theory you can think of. Especially when you look at it from a Christian standpoint. You got Kent Habit, Creation Seminar 5. You got the guy that got killed, William Cooper, and then there's so many people, bro, that just been speaking about it for so long, and it's all about the one world government, one world currency, one world religion, so they can microchip you and totally control everything about you. Pretty soon, it seems like they want to hook us up to these virtual reality machines. You got Elon Musk with his new rebranding of his company or whatever, but it's like they want you just control. They want you looking at your TV screen, your phone, and really immersed into it. It seems like with goggles now, and that way you don't care about anything that goes outside of in the real world. They just want you in their cyber world. So it's almost like we're in the beginning of the Matrix movie, where right before humanity gets sucked into their AI delusion. I'm sorry, that was a good rant. Thank you, guys. I did hear a cool song yesterday. If anybody wants to hear it, it's actually called The Matrix. That's probably why I had that fresh on my mind.
Well, it was informative, that's for sure.
Huh?
It was informative. That is for sure. Very informative, because it's just things that it's not happening by coincidence either. There's
No.
a lot of manipulation, you know, and it's behind the doors, but it's rebranded. The marketing is excellent because it's brand new, you know. And I regret upgrading to this new phone. You know, I'm going back to my old phone.
It is, bro. Like I had a phone before because I was like that, and I'm like, I'm not gonna upgrade. You hold a phone, and it gets to the point where you can't use it anymore. You have to be part of the system. If not, you can't interact online.
That's true. I mean, it was a Note 9. I went up to the Note 20. And the only difference is that I can't plug anything in. I get this echo when I go onto a stream like this. I have to, mute off, or the echo canceling doesn't work properly. It's a million different things, but it should have been a better device, is what it was touted as. So I've already bought 2 Bluetooth earplugs. I've lost one of them, all this other stuff because, the other one was tethered to the phone, via the plug. This one doesn't have any plugs. Just you have to plug it in through the power cord, and then it has an adapter for your earphones. But you can't charge and listen on your earphones at the same time. You know what I'm saying? So they've gotten rid of any plugs on the phone. So you have to do the Bluetooth, and Bluetooth can be hacked. That's the number one way people's phones are hacked is through Bluetooth. And somebody needs to have some Dulcim PM.
I like pine needle tea. It's just natural, and it's the white pine or. But yeah, for colds and flus, try some pine needle tea. It's also good for blood clots if you if you happen to have blood clots. So pine needle tea is good. The white pine is the best, and make sure it's edible and not toxic because there's some toxic. But pine needle tea, there's a lot of viral videos going around pine needle tea right now that I've seen.
Well, it's a lot of going back to basics now because, these drugs and stuff that they come on, just look at the laundry list of stuff that goes through. It's like 50 lines of just how many times, something's going to go bad or you die. But hey, it's going to cure your erectile dysfunction. Hey, how about that? It's going to cure your, your liver that's falling apart because you drink too much. Oh, look at that. It's going to cure your kidneys because of all the freaking drugs you're putting into your body. Oh, look at this, all that stuff. Oh, don't look at how many times, how many other things it's going to cause, problems. You're going to have massive explosive diarrhea and all sorts of fun stuff.
Yeah, it seems like it's usually your liver or your kidneys or your heart or your most effects affect your brain. If you got a lot of heavy metals being inserted into you, then Alzheimer's and all kinds of other neurological diseases from it.
I've basically only for seldom use. I still have a microwave, but I don't use it maybe twice a month. Yeah, I've gotten away from using my microwave.
They got us hooked on everything, bro. Most people, if Walmart Publix shuts down, half of the population of America is going to starve to death.
Oh yeah, 100%. There's 50 major franchises that are downgrading, just this year. So Applebee's, which is owned by International House of Pancakes, IHOP, is probably they're closing like half of their stores. So there's many that are going to go away. You've got Five Guys that's on the brink of bankruptcy. You've got many different like Wendy's has been in Chapter 11 for a year and a half now. You've got Pizza Hut, which is tied in with Wendy's, still in Chapter 11. But like you said, they're all controlled by the banks. So whatever they're going to throw in, it's kind of like smoke and mirrors. So there's a lot of businesses that are going to go out of business because the shipping and all this other, where's stuff being grown? I mean, where's this stuff that's supposed to be healthy for us, but it's not. It's not healthy for us. Grocery stores, this, that.
So while you guys were talking, I went and created a little image of one of my favorite sayings that I think speaks directly to what you guys are just guessing right now. And that is an old quote, unknown, but it's control a man's purse is money, control half the man. Control a man's health, you control the whole man. And it's I've been making that argument since we were arguing all the BS over Obamacare back in 2010, 2011, 2012. And it's like, you know what? The point you guys are making about the control of the banks and the taxes and the debt from student loans, all these different things that are being utilized for control. And it's like, but you, in that case, even with that, you only control half the person. But the second you can either take away their health or the health of a loved one, you suddenly have the mechanism by which to subjugate the masses. And
logical. John, isn't it?
Yeah, what's up?
Can I just ask? I think Kenny's still in the chat. I'm sharing screen there. I'm not trying to undermine the line of conversation at the moment. I just wondered if he would recommend this book. I don't know if Ken's still there or not. I have been reading it. I'm in chapter 2.
Well, he might. Let me real quick, guys. He might not be. He's on his phone, so he might not see it. So Kenny, he's asking about the Moreland and William Lane Craig Philosophical Foundation for a Christian Worldview book. If you recommend that as something that's worthwhile to read.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt there. I just.
Oh, no, you're good. That's a good question.
Have you come across this book, Logical?
Not. I know what it is. I haven't read it. I've read On Guard, William Lane's On Guard book.
Oh yeah, that's right. I asked you the other day, didn't I? Yeah. Sorry, I forgot.
Oh, it's all good.
All right. I'll stop sharing now. Anyway, sorry about that.
Oh, no worries, man.
You might catch it.
No problem with having interjections. But yeah, that I think with what we're now observing happening in real time, whether you agree, we're not going to get into whether or not it's good, bad, or indifferent, but regardless, whether the treatment itself is good or bad is irrelevant to the fact that it's being utilized to instantiate a new level of control. And it's hybridizing both the control of your money income from an income perspective as potential for income, as well as your potential for other types of treatment, like the people that are getting refused to have, organ transplants because they haven't subjugated themselves. Like, man, if you get to the point where it's like, hey, I need a heart transplant or I'm going to die, and you say, well, you can either get this or you can't get your heart transplant. I mean, that's an entirely different paradigm.
Yeah. Satan's been running it for a long time. That's illustrated in scripture. Hold on, what's happened to the audio there?
You're coming through fine.
When Jesus was tempted in the desert by Satan and offered all the kingdoms of the world and the glory of them, Jesus didn't contradict his ability to offer that. And I think Satan's been running it a long time. He's got the control of all the wealth.
Yeah, bro.
Actually, he's limited. I know. I understand that, but yeah, he's been planning this a long time.
Long time, bro. For sure. Yeah, even he tempted Jesus. I mean, here we are 6,000 years later, or 5,779. But yeah, he's been planning this for a long time.
Yeah. Well, based off of the meme that was shown, basically it's true. I mean, if you have the man's health, so they've wanted this universal health care forever here in the United States. And that's one of the things that separated a private doctor from basically a nurse, if you will. So yeah, Kaiser Permanente, you have Covenant Health, you have Blue Cross Blue Shield, which is basically just the insurance for all those. You've got, different hospitals, different states, whatever they, become their clinics, if you will. The doctors are not doctors anymore. They're basically, the nurses are getting all the information. And then the doctor just says, oh, come back in 3 weeks. Stop by the reception desk on your way out. And then they just reschedule for another 3 weeks, because most of these doctors have $1 million debt from medical school, and then they probably got married, got another $1 million debt house. all this other stuff. So, they're getting paid, $195,000, $210,000 a year to basically meet the quota of how many people come through the door every day. So the insurance company, gives the pay to the Kaiser Permanente or whoever it may be. But are you really getting the best health care when you're only seeing the doctor for 5 minutes, but you're there with the nurse for, 10, 15 minutes while she draws your blood, or she does the life signs, or, your blood pressure, your temperature, and your height, and your weight, and all that fun stuff.
Vitals.
Yeah, all your vitals is just basically that's what you're there for. And then they, your blood pressure is doing fine, but we're going to introduce a new drug to you. Why are they introducing a new drug to you? Because they have to introduce that new drug because they're getting a kickback from the pharmaceutical company who's telling them they have to add this to it. So no longer are you getting the generic Enopril, now you're getting the top rate statin that they're trying to manipulate the market. But what is that statin actually doing to you? Is it actually helping your heart, or is it actually, because we need a lot of cholesterol. This whole low cholesterol thing is a bunch of bunk, because it's too low, and they're trying to treat women and men the same way, which women carry more fat than men do. And that's just a proven fact. I mean, a woman who gets below 6% body fat is just, they're not healthy. Let's put it that way. So, the thing is with the medicine controlling it, that is what you're talking about, Iger. You go to the doctor just for a regular checkup. Hey, you have to have the slip that says you're COVID free, or you got to take this chip, or you got to do this in order to get this. And then, most of the doctors that are leaving can't get relicensed, especially here in California. A lot of private practitioners that became private practitioners are not able to get licenses their second year, or their third year, or their fourth year that they've been in, because they want them to have to be under this whole thing. Because if you have a private practitioner, he can still write you your transcripts, he can do all this for your prescriptions, and you can go to the any pharmaceutical dispensary, whether it's a drugstore, or it's a Walmart, or it's a Walgreens, or a CVS, or whatever. You can go and get that, right? But now there's a slow decline in private practice doctors, and that's the problem that we're going to run into when you have to check into a large clinic like a Kaiser or a Covenant or somebody like that, to where they've now put a mandate. Oh, it's mandated now that you're under our health shield, or whatever they want to call it for their medical insurance. Now you're under us. Oh, you have to have this little bio thing implanted into your arm for so we can test your vitals, and then we'll call you when something's going on. And I'll end with that.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of weird stuff going on. I tell you what. So I last year I wrote. I'm going to read you a portion of something that I wrote last year, which I think is, I may not even gone far enough in this, but here's what we're at now. I'll skip the intro portion. It's basically a speech I wrote for myself. They tell us we should have no trepidation at the formation of police forces that are more heavily armed than foreign armies. That suspension of the need for warrants to listen to our conversations is reasonable, all while releasing hardened criminals to walk our streets, rape our women, and kill our children. Crime is on the rise, but while they suspend the need even for bail, these same people say it is reasonable to suspend due process and to remove one's rights of self-defense. They allow criminals to burn towns, loot cities, and even to extort protection money from businesses. Yet they order the police armies to stand down, to allow destruction, and even go so far as to criminally charge law-abiding citizens for protecting themselves from the mob. All of this while we are ordered to remain home, forbidden to open our businesses, required to cover our faces, even if alone, and told what is and what is not essential to society. This has destroyed our confidence, crushed our happiness, accelerated the depression of many, and even the death of some. For what? Our schools have been empty, our children lost, our buildings deserted, our roads empty, and our futures uncertain. Yet our politicians still force us to pay them as they pay their enforcers with our money. Yet even as our economy collapses, they raise our taxes and create new demand for fees. They even go so far as to threaten our access to medicine should we not comply with their tyranny. All of this while we are expected to come begging for crumbs, accept reduced income, and willingly comply as they destroy our quality of life. Is this nothing but an outlandish conspiracy theory with no credible evidence? Am I in need of therapy to deal with the struggles we all currently face? Or are these real threats to our liberty? Let us not deceive ourselves. These are the implements of war and of subjugation, the last arguments to which tyrants resort. Who is making noise over here? No, the motive is clear. They are meant for us. They are the chains which the establishment oligarchs have been forging for over a century. And what have we to oppose them? Shall we try verbal argument? No, this has been tried for decades, and there is nothing new to offer on this subject. Either we are a free republic, and the powers granted to our government clearly detailed in our Constitution, and are not open to subjective whim, or we are not. We have fought wars on other lands for the express purpose of keeping these threats of communism and socialism from our shores, but it seems that this has all been in vain. They have conquered our schools, infiltrated our legislatures, overwhelmed our bureaucracies, and now through blatant corruption have installed one of their own in the highest office in the land. So, shall we resort to entreaty and humble supplication? Shall we approach our courts and rely on the rule of law? This has been done. This past decade has made it a plain truth. Our judges have been compromised and no longer protect the federal or state constitutions which they have sworn to uphold. We are told to keep holding out hope, to search for answers within the system, to just wait for the next election. I have heard this every year for the last 20 years, and each year, these attempts have been made to no avail. The problems have not been solved, they have gotten worse. Let us not, therefore, deceive ourselves. We have done everything that can be done to avert the storm which is now here. We have petitioned, we have remonstrated, we have supplicated, we have prostrated ourselves before mayors, governors, senators, representatives. We have implored our state and federal Supreme Courts to provide remedy and to arrest the tyrannical hands of our domestic enemies who wish to destroy our freedom. Yet our petitions have been slighted. Our remonstrances have produced additional violence and insult. Our supplications have been disregarded. We have been spurned with contempt by those to whom we have granted the power for these express purposes. In vain, after these things, we may indulge the fond hope of peace and reconciliation. But there is no longer any room for hope. If we wish to remain free, if we wish to preserve and violate those inestimable privileges for which we have so long been privileged to enjoy, if we mean not basely to abandon the noble struggle in which our forebears engaged, and which we have pledged ourselves to never abandon until the glorious object of our contest shall be obtained, I say we must fight. I repeat, we must fight. Anyway, I go on for a while, but I feel like we are in a position these days where the end result of all of that is heading our way very, very rapidly.
Yeah, buddy.
That was excellent.
Yeah, well, thank you.
You should go up in Congress and say your speech, but man, it's so sad. I've seen, like, even here in where I live at in the county, some people go up to like the people, the people in charge, and they tell them everything, bro. They tell them all about the side effects and just so all everything, bro, and nothing happens. It's like these people just don't care, bro. It's just sad. They're paid. They're bought and paid for, it seems like, by the
yeah, they're completely controlled.
You can tell them the truth to their face and what's going on, and nothing happens, bro. It's even like, even in higher ups, like we had Trump the whole time saying he was going to arrest Hillary Clinton, and nothing happened. Like they just get away with whatever they want, bro.
No, I agree. I mean, it's the way I'll finish my speech. Because I kind of address some of that stuff. They tell us that we are weak, unable to cope with so formidable an adversary. But when shall we be stronger? Will it be the next week or the next year? Will it be when we are totally disarmed and when drones shall be stationed in every house? Shall we gather strength by irresolution and inaction? Shall we acquire the means of effectual resistance by lying supinely on our backs and hugging the delusive phantom of hope, until our enemies shall have bound us hand and foot? We are not weak if we make proper use of those means by which the God of nature has placed in our power. The millions of people, armed in the holy cause of liberty, and in such a country as that which we possess, are invincible by any force which our enemy can send against us. Besides, we shall not fight our battles alone. There is a just God who presides over the destinies of nations, and who will raise up friends to fight battles alongside us. The battle is not to the strong alone. It is to the vigilant, to the active, to the brave. Besides, we have no election. If we were base enough to desire it, it is now too late to retire from the contest. There is no retreat but in submission of freedom. Our chains are forged. Their clanking may be heard in all levels of government. The conflict is inevitable, and I say let it come. It is in vain to extenuate the matter. Many may cry, peace, peace, but there is no peace. This war has already begun. It has been declared upon us and continues even should you refuse to accept it. The clash of proverbial arms has already begun, and our brothers are already in the field of battle. Why stand we here idle? Do you not wish, or do you hope that all this will just vanish, that somehow our enemies will freely return our liberties? No, they will not. And for this, I implore you to return to reason. In the end, you must ask yourself, is life so dear and peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and surrender of freedom? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty. I took part of that stuff from Patrick Henry's speech. It's I think that was one of the most Patrick Henry's speech. The original version of all that was one of the most epic of all time. The way he levied that to the legislature of Virginia.
Well, one of the things that was a great speech letter that you basically produced probably a while ago, right?
Yeah, I wrote that. I want to say it was like September, maybe of last year.
Yeah, and it still holds true today. Nothing's changed. The problem is, like what Iger was saying, you go down there and you talk to them. One of the things they always say is we don't have the budget. It's not in the budget. That's kind of their fallback because they've already put all this into their budget. But yet they can, automatically allocate whatever funds they want, but they don't want to fix the problem of the citizens that they're looking over that are crying out loud. Just as that speech says that, hey, you're trying to take away, my child's right to choose during school. You're trying to take away all these things that our tax money gives to you. If I take my child out of that public school, do I get that tax money back? So then I can put them into a private school. And no, you don't. I think it's here in California, it's a year. It's $12,000 a student from kindergarten to sixth grade, and then from junior high, it's like $14,000 a year. It's crazy per child.
Oh yeah, the school thing is one of my biggest pet peeves. So I used to goof off and do like political action stuff here in Nashville, and I ran a political action committee, and I'm involved in like mayoral elections, all this kind of stuff, right? And I got super pissed when I started looking at like different budgets for like schools and stuff, because as you know, everywhere it's a standard talking point of like, oh, we need to raise property taxes for the children. There's not enough money for education and yada 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 yada, right? And I'm just like, okay, so let's go look at the numbers. So I remember go and look at the Davidson County school budget. It's $1.2 billion a year. And I'm like, you're telling me that there's less than 1,000 companies on the planet that have more than $1 billion, publicly traded companies on the planet that do more than $1 billion a year in revenue? And you're telling me we can't run one freaking county of schools when you have no like physical product you have to produce? Your single biggest expense is your human capital. You don't have to pay taxes, and you don't have to maintain a profit margin. And you're telling me $1 billion is not enough? I call bullshit. So I started going through the budget, and it's like, okay, the single biggest line item, which would be your salaries, right, made up just over 50% of the total budget availability. So you're telling me you have $500 million left over after you covered your single biggest expense, and then you're running out of money for freaking paper at the end of the year? I call stone cold bullshit. And anyway, I'm using that as an example. And it's like you go down the rabbit hole and you find out stupid crap like, oh, the different principals of schools own the vending companies that handle things like vending machines in the schools that they're the principal of. It's like, hang on, we're paying the company that's owned by the principal of a school to do services. There's nothing untoward about that. That doesn't make any sense. It was like, that's using it as an example. There's like so many of those different, line items, and it's like, what are we doing? And you want to raise property taxes again? Like, I don't believe you. And you're not paying the teachers tons and tons of money, but somehow there's a ridiculous amount of administrators who are all making 150 to 200K a year. And then you're like, oh, there's not enough money for teachers. Really? There's not enough money for teachers, but there's enough to pay your dumbass $200,000 a year. Again, I'm calling bullshit. Anyway.
Hey guys, I gotta go inside, man. I wanted to share a Matrix song that I heard yesterday, but I'm gonna save it for next time because I wanna close with this. There was I was on Instagram. I have an Instagram page, Cyber Television, but I was debating. I don't remember, but I was talking to somebody, and I was like, "Well, how do we get out? How do we escape this 5G, these mandates, all this crap?" And he's like, I know how to get out. Some random guy comment. And then he's like, read Ezekiel 7, verse 15 to 16. And so I pulled it up. It's Ezekiel 7, verse 15 and 16, King James Version. Is the sword is without, and the pestilence and the famine within. He that is in the field shall die with the sword, and he that is in the city, famine and pestilence shall devour him. But they that escape of them shall escape and shall be on the mountains like doves of the valleys, all of them mourning, everyone for his iniquity. So I think like if you get to some isolated mountain, maybe you can escape all this and be self-dependent from all these corporations, grow your own food, collect your own water, whatnot. But with that too, I want to close with the sinner's prayer for anybody out there that hasn't accepted Jesus yet. It's dear Lord Jesus, I know that I'm a sinner and I ask for forgiveness. I believe you died for my sins and rose from the dead. I turn from my sins and invite you to come into my heart and life. I want to trust and follow you as my Lord and Savior. Amen. And LPP, thanks for having me on, man. Alex, always a pleasure talking to you. Jamie Russell, man, you're welcome on my channel anytime. Sorry I didn't see you last time. And Bob in England over here, man. Good luck out there, bro. It's crazy everywhere right now, but yeah. LPP, I'm coming to visit you at the Smoky Mountains, if anything, because that's the closest mountains that we got here from Florida. So God bless y'all. Y'all have a good night, and I might be back later. I'll leave my screen on, but I gotta go inside.
No, yeah, I think no problem, man. I think I'm gonna wrap up. I'm coming up on 4 hours. I think I'm gonna call it a night because it's almost 3 a.m. my time too. So, anybody have last words before we wrap up?
When's your next dumpster fire?
I don't know. I may do a dumpster fire tomorrow. I haven't decided yet. Well, actually, I take that back. I am doing a stream tomorrow. It may turn into a dumpster fire. I'm not sure. I got a review I'm going to do tomorrow. And then I'm not sure if anything's going on Sunday. I mean, I'll do something on Sunday. We just need more atheists to show up so we can have a dumpster fire.
I would never let Jamie into my channel, into my studio. I don't know why Iger would.
Well, okay. So, Jamie, you got any last words? Jamie must be gone. Alec, you got any last words?
Just God bless everybody and take care. Enjoy your weekend.
Appreciate that. Bob, any last words?
Yeah, get yourselves a King James Bible, believe on the Lord Jesus Christ. There's nobody else on this earth who can be trusted, who's ever lived. I mean, Jesus Christ is the only one to trust, so...
That's very true. That's very true. Well, folks, I appreciate everybody for hanging around for 4 hours, and appreciate to Doki and George, everybody who was doing super chats, and Jamie. Appreciate you guys very much. And folks, as you contemplate all of these things we discuss, the different positions that are put forth and the ideas that you must consider, Make sure that the ultimate conclusions that you reach and the foundation of your worldview is logical, plausible, and probable. See y'all tomorrow.